Chapter 457. The mountain is high, the road is long, the pit is deep, the army is running. Who dares to attack? Only I. Shi Wenguang smacked his lips, and his eyes instantly became cold. The scenes of him leading the army to battle in the past appeared in front of his eyes, and it was so fitting to the poem he was tasting. Yu Qianqiu immediately felt the aura of a powerful army coming from his body. Together with his military uniform, he was fascinated by the war history of this great general. Shi Wenguang let out a deep breath and sighed. Sir, can you tell me who that great man is? Shi Wenguang is willing to pay a personal visit. General, don't mention this again, I won't tell you. Think about what I said. Yu Qianqiu said awkwardly. He thought to himself, even I can only be fascinated by Chairman Mao. Even if I tell you, you won't be able to meet him. Do I have a choice? Shi Wenguang looked at Yu Qianqiu and smiled bitterly. Yes, of course you have a choice. Yu Qianqiu said obediently, I never force people to do things they don't like. Shi Wenguang shook his head slightly. You even told me about this, it's the same as cutting off all my escape routes. If I don't agree with your ruthless killing intent, it's impossible for you to let me go. With your ability in the cultivation world, isn't it good to be a free and unfettered immortal? Why are you so interested in worldly matters? Shi Wenguang asked. Yu Qianqiu was silent for a long time about this question. He slowly paced back and forth in the tent. While walking he said, one day I had a dream. It was a very real dream. In the dream I died helplessly. I didn't even have the slightest chance to resist. That kind of desolate and helpless state of mind is not something that outsiders can understand. After I woke up, I was worried that this kind of thing would repeat to me, so I made up my mind, no matter in heaven or earth, I don't want anyone to force me to die. If a person obstructs me, I will kill a god. If a god obstructs me, I will kill a god. I don't want to have any shackles anymore, I want to live a truly free and unfettered life. Mr. is indeed an extraordinary person. You've awakened from your dream and made up your mind. Shi Wenguang was speechless. A madman really was a madman. Just because of a dream, he actually wanted to mobilize troops to conquer the world. After a pause, he asked with some doubts, if you can stand out in the cultivation world, what you are worried about will not happen. How can the secular people force you? Yu Qianqiu stopped in his tracks. He suddenly turned around and said word by word, I still have my family in the secular world. I won't allow anyone in this world to force my family to die. No one. The determination in his words could not be doubted. When Shi Wenguang heard this, he suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. Startled, he said perfunctorily, Mr. really values friendship and righteousness. General Shi, I'm not joking with you. Yu Qianqiu walked in front of him and said indifferently, I can do my best to help you conquer the world, but the price your Shi clan has to pay is to ensure my Yu clan's prosperity and safety for 10 lifetimes. After that, we don't owe each other anything. This is my goal. You don't need to have any doubts. As he said this, he pointed to the spirit pill in his hand and said, the spirit pill in your hand is a treasure that everyone in the cultivation world dreams of. It is even more impossible for mortals to have the chance to obtain it. I will use this spirit pill to extend your life by at least 50 years in exchange for your Shi clan's promise to ensure my Yu clan's prosperity and safety for 10 lifetimes. This request is not too much, is it? Shi Wenguang quickly calculated in his heart. 1 world in exchange for 10 lifetimes of prosperity and safety for his Yu clan. This deal was definitely worth it. His eyes immediately lit up. Mister, are you serious? Does General think that we are talking about a child's game? Yu Qianqiu said expressionlessly. Since that is the case, do you dare to make an oath with me? Shi Wenguang raised a large, calloused palm. Yu Qianqiu looked at him and smiled. It seemed that this guy also knew that cultivators could not casually make oaths. He actually wanted to use this to restrain himself. He nodded and said, why not? However, I have to say something unpleasant first. Before you seize the world, you must listen to my arrangements. Shi Wenguang said without hesitation, of course. Although I have millions of lions under me, I am only content with a small area. It is difficult for me to take care of the whole situation. Mr., on the other hand, must have a plan in mind. You will definitely make proper arrangements. Shi Wenguang absolutely believes in Mr.'s ability. That is great. Only the general understands me. Yu Qianqiu waved his palm and slapped his palm. Their 10 fingers intersected and clasped together. Shi Wenguang said in a deep voice, if Mr. can help my Shi clan control the world's divine weapon, my Shi clan will ensure the Yu clan's prosperity and safety for 10 lifetimes. If I go against this oath, my Shi clan will not have a good ending. I, Yu Qianqiu, Will help the Sher clan to ascend to the top of the world in exchange for 10 lifetimes of prosperity and safety for the Yu clan's descendants. If I go against this oath, I will be punished by the heavens. Yu Qianqiu said with a faint smile. Is General at ease now? After the two of them let go of each other, Shi Wenguang stuffed the spirit pill in his other hand into his mouth and swallowed it without saying a word. He used his actions to show that he no longer had any doubts. Then he laughed out loud and said, "Servants, serve wine and dishes." Yu Qianqiu wanted to help him completely stimulate the medicinal effects of the spirit pill, but he was interrupted. He thought about it and gave up on this idea. He muttered to himself, "Going too far is as bad as falling short." After waiting for a while, there was no response from outside. The two of them looked at each other and were stunned. They walked to the door and lifted the curtain together. They saw that everyone within 30 meters outside had retreated completely. Shi Wenguang smiled bitterly and said, "Mr. Subordinates are indeed well trained." As soon as he said this, Yu Qianqiu immediately understood. His subordinates knew that he wanted to say something private and was afraid that it would be heard by outsiders. Even the guards in the vicinity had been cleared away. How efficient. He smiled awkwardly and said, "It's good that there's no one around. I happen to have something that I need General's help with." The two of them looked outside and put down the curtain at the same time. They walked back side by side and the misunderstanding from before was completely gone. Shi Wenguang asked, "What do you need me to do, mister?" "I heard that General has many experts who are good at disguising themselves. I have a group of people who want to use this technique to change their appearance," Yu Qianqiu said. Shi Wenguang was surprised and said, "With Mr. Supernatural power, isn't it easy to change your appearance?" Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes and said, "Does General really think that people in the cultivation world are living gods who can change their appearance at any time?" That's easy. I don't dare to guarantee other things, but when it comes to disguising, it's not a problem at all. I've been fighting here for many years, and in order to spy on the enemy, disguising is the most common method." Shi Wenguang smiled and asked, "I wonder if Mr. wants to directly put on makeup or use a human skin mask to change your appearance." "You have human skin masks here?" Yu Qianqiu was slightly surprised. He had never come into contact with such a thing, and he felt that it was a little strange. When two armies fight, death is a common occurrence. Naturally, there's no lack of human skin, Shi Wenguang said indifferently. Yu Qianqiu gulped and asked, "Which one is more convenient to use?" Although he wasn't afraid, he subconsciously rejected it. Who would like to stick dead people's skin on their face? Of course it's convenient to use a human skin mask. When you don't want to use it, you can just take it off and stick it on again. It's not like makeup. Once you take it off and want to change your appearance again, if you don't know how to do it yourself, you'll have to bring along people who know how to change their appearance, and it's also time-consuming, Shi Wenguang explained. Damn it. Looks like I really have to use that disgusting thing. Yu Qianqiu coughed and said, "Then I'll have to trouble General to prepare a few reliable disguising experts for me. Make sure to keep it a secret and don't let the news leak." The next day, a large tent was suddenly erected in the Western military camp. There were more than 60 people sitting cross-legged inside. They were the 30 Special Forces members led by Hong Qi and Gu Qingyun respectively. More than 10 soldiers who were good at disguising were meticulously taking their measurements. For something like a human skin mask, if the size was not suitable, then it would be a big problem. Anyone could tell at a glance that it was a disguise. Ever since Zhang Ping arrived, he hadn't said a word. Yu Qianqiu didn't care about him. He knew that he was reminiscing about the past, so he pulled an old soldier aside and kept asking questions. "Master, you have to help me make it look better. The nose needs to be like this and a little higher. Yes, just like this." After constant modification, Yu Qianqiu picked up a picture, shook his head and praised, "Indeed a handsome and elegant man. Why do I feel that he looks a little familiar?" Shi Wenguang was really speechless. The human skin mask was originally used to hide one's original appearance. It was fine as long as it didn't reveal anything. Why would there be so many requirements? Under normal circumstances, it was better to be as low-key as possible. Who would deliberately make themselves so conspicuous? This guy was really different. Who does he look like? Yu Qianqiu held the picture and muttered. Suddenly, his expression froze and he screamed, "Damn it! It's that old bastard Nongzhu." It turned out that he had been so focused on making himself more handsome that he had unknowingly chosen the most handsome guy he had ever seen. He had accidentally stolen Nongzhu's innate copyright. Although he only looked 70 to 80% like Nongzhu, he was already handsome enough. "Why don't we make some changes and make it a little uglier?" The old soldier asked in an inquiring tone. There's no need to make it ugly. Let's just make do with it. It'll be too troublesome to change it. Just make a few more of it according to this style. Yu Qianqiu shoved the picture to the old soldier. The old soldier accepted the order verbally, but in his heart, he was cursing. So you know how to be afraid of trouble. I thought you were going to change it by a few days. The sizes of Hong Chi and the other two's masks had already been prepared. All they had to do was wait for the real thing to be made. Yu Qianqiu looked at the three people in front of him. He took out 2 jade archives and handed one to Hong Chi and Gu Qingyun, saying, "Inside are some people who can help you during critical moments. Remember, rely on yourself for everything. Don't trouble others unless it's absolutely necessary." Yes. The two gladly accepted the order. Yu Qianqiu turned to Zhang Peng and said, "You haven't come into contact with the cultivation world, and you don't have much experience either. Just follow me." Zhang Peng bowed and accepted the order. Yu Qianqiu nodded at the three of them, indicating for them to wait. He then pulled Shi Wenguang along and the two of them walked out of the tent while talking. Chapter 458. During this period of time, Yu Qianqiu, who had caused a storm in the Chinese cultivation world, had disappeared. He had disappeared completely. He had left without a trace. Ever since he left the Huaxia Cultivation Alliance, the Daoyuo sect decided to fight him to the death because they couldn't allow such an enemy to grow. It was too dangerous. Therefore they sent many people to search openly and secretly, but they couldn't find a trace of him. Someone commented, "He came and left quietly. He didn't take anything with him and only left a bunch of enemies." No matter what others said, in a room in the Myriad Fragrance Garden on Fuxian Island, Yu Qianqiu was sleeping soundly while hugging a soft and tender body. Inside the brocade quilt, half of Hibiscus's delicate body was exposed. She opened her eyes wide and looked at his sleeping posture. Suddenly, she giggled and stretched out her 2 slender fingers to pinch his nose. She didn't let him breathe because the noise coming from that place was very loud. Yu Qianqiu, who had his nose pinched, didn't even open his eyes. He made a cat's voice through his nose and said, "Serious warning, if you don't let me breathe through my nose, I will be very angry. Once I get angry, the consequences will be very serious. Are you going to let go?" "No, I definitely won't let go." Hibiscus giggled. However, his hand had already touched a certain sensitive part of her body. It made her tremble and she couldn't laugh anymore. "Last warning, if you don't let go, you will face severe punishment. Are you going to let go?" Yu Qianqiu said righteously. Hibiscus quickly retracted her hand and hid under the quilt. Yu Qianqiu opened his eyes and said with a naughty smile, "I forgot to tell you, if you dare to bully my people in bed, even if you let go, I won't let you go. Little vixen, hand over your life." With that said, he suddenly buried himself under the quilt. Suddenly there was a messy sound coming from the bed. It seemed like Hibiscus was crying for help in a very coquettish manner. After a long time, the two of them had enough fun. Both of them weakly hugged each other and poked their heads out. Yu Qianqiu kept asking her about Fuxian Island. Hearing Furong's answers, he suddenly pushed her away and looked at her seriously. "Come with me, I'll take you out of here." The room instantly became silent. Furong widened her eyes and asked weakly, "Are you going to take me away from Fuxian Island?" She seemed to be lacking in confidence. Her delicate body was trembling uncontrollably, which meant that she was a little nervous about leaving supporting Immortal Island. "Right, I will bring you out of Fuxian Island. It is time for you to go out and have a walk. This broken island shouldn't trap you for the rest of your life." Yu Qianqiu looked at her with a pitiful expression. He caressed her hair to console her. "I'm afraid that if I go out, I won't be able to find the way back." As Hibiscus spoke, she grabbed onto Yu Qianqiu's arm tightly. It was as though she was grabbing onto her last life-saving straw. Her eyes were filled with fear and unease. "How can that be? Don't you still have me?" Yu Qianqiu tried his best to smile very gently, hoping to give her a smile that would make her feel at ease. "I heard from the female senior in the garden that there is a kind of man in this world that is like the wind. When he comes suddenly, and when he leaves immediately. He won't stay. Women will never be able to accompany him. You came very suddenly and left just like that. Could you be that man who is like the wind?" The more Hibiscus spoke, the softer her voice became. She didn't dare to look at him directly. She was afraid that he would be unhappy because of what she said. "Oh, there is such a flashy saying? Damn, which slut said that?" Yu Qianqiu said in astonishment. He looked at Hibiscus, who seemed to have done something wrong. He placed his hand on her smooth and soft waist and shook it. "Look at me." Hibiscus looked at him in confusion. She saw Yu Qianqiu stretch out a palm and solemnly say, I, Yu Qianqiu, swear to the heavens that as long as Hibiscus doesn't despise me, don't hate me, I, Yu Qianqiu, will never abandon her in this lifetime. I will never let her get lost. After swearing, Hibiscus's eyes instantly brightened. They were filled with indescribable joy. She suddenly hugged him fiercely like an octopus. She nodded repeatedly and said, I will never despise you, never hate you. I'll go with you. Cough cough, smelly woman, you're strangling me to death. Quickly let go. I'm willing. I'll strangle you to death. I'll strangle you, smelly man. Just as Hibiscus's coquettish words finished, a slap landed on her butt. Hibiscus immediately retaliated strongly. The bed became a mess again. The blankets couldn't cover her anymore. TSK. That was like the radiance of spring. All right. Stop fighting. I admit defeat. After a long time, Yu Qianqiu grabbed Hibiscus's hands and said with a bitter smile. Not to mention that this seemingly frail woman had a peerless weapon in her possession. This was the first time he discovered that she actually had such exuberant energy. She could torment someone to death. Hibiscus didn't say anything else and leaned over again. Yu Qianqiu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Hibiscus, we can't always laze around in bed. If you want to go with me, shouldn't you tell your father first? Speaking of this, Hibiscus's expression became hesitant again. She said embarrassedly, he keeps saying that you're a little heartless. What if he doesn't let me go with you? Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows. His expression immediately softened. That was his future father-in-law. If he scolded him, so be it. He awkwardly smiled and said, you go and tell him. With me here he won't stop you. Go quickly, we're in a hurry. Hibiscus was very confident in him. She nodded and immediately got out of the quilt to put on her clothes. Yu Qianqiu leaned sideways with his head propped up to admire. With such a graceful beauty accompanying him, this life was not in vain. After watching Hibiscus go out, he was suddenly shocked and quickly got up to put on his clothes. Ferdinand knew that he was going to take his daughter away, so he would definitely come to question him. He couldn't let others see him lying naked on his daughter's bed. Ferdinand was as angry as ever. In fact, he knew that Yu Qianqiu came. He was just about to go to the backyard to see his daughter, who knew that the door was closed and there were some muffled sounds inside. How could he not know who came? The reason why Ferdinand was angry was that he suspected that this kid had ulterior motives. Otherwise, how could he do that with his daughter every time he came? It was too outrageous. He was simply unscrupulous and condescending. This brat's notorious behavior had already forced him to clear out the entire backyard as his daughter's territory. Even he himself had to find someone else to temporarily stay with, let alone the others. What was the use of being angry? Who asked his precious daughter to like him? Who asked him to owe his daughter too much? He really didn't dare to make her a little unhappy. Ferdinand sighed helplessly. This brat, Yu Qianqiu, had taken away the most precious thing in his life. His daughter's face was still full of lust and happiness. What else could he say? Father, Yu Qianqiu asked you to go over. Hibiscus said shyly. She wanted to say that she wanted to go with Yu Qianqiu, but she didn't dare to say it when the words were on the tip of her tongue. She simply threw the trouble to Yu Qianqiu. If this sentence was heard by Yu Qianqiu would be so grateful that he would cry bitterly and shout, Sister, how can I be a man if you do this? Sure enough, when Ferdinand heard this, he was so angry that smoke came out of his 7 orifices. His body trembled and his eyes were wide open. That bastard had just done that with my daughter. Now he actually sent my daughter over and asked me to go over to see him. This was simply unreasonable. Ferdinand was so angry that he almost vomited blood. Seeing that his hair and beard were trembling, his eyes were red, and his body was trembling, Hibiscus asked doubtfully, Father, what's wrong with you? The word father was like a cooling agent that immediately made Ferdinand feel much better. Hibiscus usually didn't call him father. She would only call him like this when it was related to Yu Qianqiu. But how could this anger be so easily dispelled? Ferdinand slammed the table with a bang. Like a tiger that was about to eat people, he stood up and shouted angrily, Okay, I'll go and see this great god. Yu Qianqiu was doing chest expansion exercises in the small garden in the backyard. He was so refreshed. In the blink of an eye. My future father-in-law is here. When Yu Qianqiu just put on a smiling face and was ready to welcome him, he suddenly found that something was wrong. Why is Ferdinand's face as black as Lord Bao's? Is he poisoned? Hibiscus's expression was also a little nervous. Countless thoughts turned in an instant, but she didn't expect Hibiscus's words to spoil everything. But she still smiled and bowed. "Senior Fei. You're good, Yu Qianqiu." Ferdinand's hand trembled. He pointed his finger and shouted, I'll kill you." Then he slammed his palm on Yu Qianqiu's head. Damn. Yu Qianqiu quickly dodged. Bang! A pit had already appeared on the ground. Ah! Hibiscus screamed and flashed to Yu Qianqiu's side to block. Ferdinand didn't say anything and didn't care about his daughter. He was so angry that his eyes turned red. He raised his palm and slammed it toward the two people. Yu Qianqiu hurriedly hugged Hibiscus and dodged together. The garden was suddenly in a mess. It was really a pit with one palm. "Old thing, if you don't stop, don't blame me for being rude." Yu Qianqiu hugged Hibiscus and dodged here and there. He was in a mess. With his current cultivation, he didn't need to be afraid of Ferdinand at all. However, it also depended on who he was dealing with. Good. I want to see how you are going to be rude." Ferdinand was so angry that he laughed. He moved his finger and a cold light flew out of the storage bag. A flying sword stood in the air. Yu Qianqiu narrowed his eyes and quickly turned Hibiscus behind him to protect her. He said in a deep voice, "Ferdinand, are you serious? Did you take the wrong medicine? What did I do to make you so angry? Even if I want to take Hibiscus away, you don't need to be so angry. You don't even care about your daughter's life? You're an unreasonable, ruthless, and shameless person. I swear. Ferdinand was stunned on the spot. He was mute for a long time before he said in shock, "What did you say? You want to take Hibiscus away?" Yu Qianqiu scratched his head and looked back at Hibiscus, who was staring at her father. He turned his head and asked suspiciously, "Didn't Hibiscus tell you just now?" Chapter 459. Ferdinand looked at his daughter and was a little confused. "Since I didn't tell you, why are you so angry?" Yu Qianqiu was also a little confused and thought, "Don't tell me you only know about me and your daughter today. You created such a quiet environment to have an affair." Unable to figure it out, he turned back and asked again, "Ferong, what did you say to your father?" Ferong was bashful. "Didn't you ask me to come to see you?" Ferdinand asked, and the flying sword had been taken back. "Oh, what are you talking about? If I want to see you, I should go to see you. How can I ask you to come over?" Yu Qianqiu was stunned and thought, "I am not that thick-skinned. I just did it with your daughter and then immediately asked you to come to see me. Isn't this insulting?" The two men's eyes returned to Ferong again. Yu Qianqiu asked suspiciously, "Didn't you tell your father about this?" "I called my father. You should tell him." Ferong pulled his sleeve. The two men immediately looked at each other and understood a little. It turned out that this girl's inappropriate words almost caused the father-in-law and son-in-law to fight desperately, but they still didn't know what was going on. Yu Qianqiu coughed twice and held Ferong's hand awkwardly. He said to Ferdinand, "Senior Ferdinand, let's forget about this. Let's get back to business." Ferdinand also coughed twice and threw the flying sword into the storage bag. He said with a somewhat unnatural expression, "Well, let's talk business." He thought, "I have misunderstood this kid, but it doesn't matter. I have given you my daughter. It doesn't matter if I misunderstand you. I came this time to take Ferong away. I hope Senior Ferdinand can help me." Yu Qianqiu said respectfully. Ferdinand's expression also became solemn. He frowned deeply and said, "It's not that I don't want you to take Ferong away, but do you know your current situation? There is no possibility of mediation between you and Daluo sect now. It has reached the point where you can't coexist with each other. Do you think it's safe to take Ferong with you?" Yu Qianqiu sneered. "Daluo sect? Let them jump around for now. Sooner or later, I will remove their names from the cultivation world. You don't have to worry about this. If I can't guarantee Ferong's safety, I won't take her away." Remove the Daluo sect from the cultivation world? Ferdinand was speechless. Even Fuxian Island did not dare to say such words. He shook his head and sighed, "Young and frivolous. Do you really think that a sect that has stood in the cultivation world for thousands of years is really that simple? The sect's roots run deep, and the things inside are definitely not things that outsiders can easily understand. Those old monsters who became famous many years ago, although they no longer appear, who dares to say that they are already dead? No matter how deep the roots are, I will still uproot them." Yu Qianqiu narrowed his eyes and smiled, "Senior Fei, don't worry. There won't be any danger for Ferong to follow me. I'm prepared to bring her to travel around and let her gain some experience. Staying on Fuxian Island for the rest of her life isn't a solution." As he spoke, he gently held Ferong in his arms with a face full of pity. Furong nodded at her father seriously, her eyes begging for her father's consent. Ferdinand's heart instantly softened. He shook his head and sighed. Fine, fine. As long as you treat my daughter well, I don't care about anything else. But I'll say this first. If you let anything happen to Furong, I'll make you pay even if I have to sacrifice this old life of mine. Senior Fei, I won't say anything unnecessary. I'll take your daughter away today and I'll give you a promise. Yu Qianqiu said with a solemn expression. I'll protect Furong with all my heart for the rest of her life. I won't bully her and no one else can bully her either. Whoever dares to touch her will have to die. Furong, who was in his arms, immediately let out a whimper and hugged his waist tightly. Good, good, good. Ferdinand nodded repeatedly and asked with great relief, Where are you going to take Furong to travel? If I have time I'll go see you guys. Yu Qianqiu looked at Furong lovingly and said, I'll take her to travel around the countries and let her see the customs of the foreign lands. I hope Senior Fei can keep this a secret for me. Oh, what did you say? Ferdinand laughed halfway and suddenly choked on his throat. He said in exasperation, Going to a foreign country? Are you crazy? You killed a few foreign cultivators in the 100 Flowers Valley, and the Yen father and son have enmity with you. You're courting death by going there. Senior Fei. Yu Qianqiu shouted loudly and then said with a smile, Please leave Furong to me with peace of mind. He lowered his head and asked Furong, Are you afraid? Furong shook her head. Her eyes flickered as she looked at Ferdinand, still looking pitiful and pleading. Ferdinand opened his mouth for a while and finally stomped his feet heavily. Sigh. You guys. What do you want me to say? Furong, let's say goodbye to your father. Yu Qianqiu pulled Furong away and the two of them faced Ferdinand side by side and bowed deeply. Yu Qianqiu said with a smile, Senior Fei, please take care of yourself. I'll bring Furong back to see you in the future. You guys. Ferdinand was speechless looking at the two of them. Yu Qianqiu pulled Furong into his arms again and said with a light smile, Close your eyes. Don't open them until I say something. Furong heavily nodded her head and subconsciously held him tightly. She also closed her eyes tightly. She knew that Yu Qianqiu was about to use that shadowless and traceless magic technique. Yu Qianqiu smiled faintly and could not help but kiss her smooth forehead gently. Then, the two of them suddenly disappeared on the spot. Ferdinand's eyes widened as he realized something very strange. He looked around and released his divine sense to search around, but there was no sign of anyone. Even an expert at the final stage of the tribulation stage could not teleport with a person. Ferdinand stood in the garden for a long time. Did his daughter just leave him like this? Then he let out a sigh of relief. Since Yu Qianqiu had such remarkable power, it should not be a problem for him to protect himself with Furong when he encountered danger. No wonder he was so confident. No wonder old ancestor Qingnu could not catch him back then. Although Furong was the daughter of the principal elder of Wanfen Garden, she rarely met anyone in the entire Fuxian Island. Her disappearance would probably not be noticed or cared by anyone in the entire Fuxian Island. Of course, Ferdinand, who was in a daze at the moment, was full of disappointment as if someone had cut out a piece of flesh from his heart. Yu Qianqiu teleported to a secret place in Utopia with Hibiscus. After settling down for a while, they disappeared again. When they reappeared, they were already in an empty military camp, and there were endless sounds of large-scale people training and killing outside. Yu Qianqiu looked at Furong, who was hugging him tightly in his arms, and a smirk appeared on his face. He broke free from her and stood at the side. Furong's face was immediately filled with uneasiness. She stood at the same place and did not dare to move. Her hands were touching everywhere, but her eyes were closed tightly. It was obvious that she listened to Yu Qianqiu's instructions and did not dare to open her eyes out of fear. Yu Qianqiu did not dare to scare her, so he quickly said, All right, open your eyes. The first thing Furong did when she opened her eyes was not to look at the surrounding environment, but to quickly walk over and grab Yu Qianqiu's arm. Then she widened her eyes and looked around. She asked with some uneasiness, Where are we? Don't be afraid. This is a secular military camp. Let's go. I'll take you out to take a look. Yu Qianqiu held her hand and pulled her out of the tent. The sun was shining brightly outside, but dust was flying everywhere. The army was training non-stop. Bright armor, long spears and steeds galloped forward. It was a grand and magnificent sight. Furong looked at all of this curiously. This was something she had never seen before. Yu Qianqiu was like a little pet as he pulled her around. She turned her head around as if she could never get enough of seeing. A woman who had not been tainted by the secular world was like a fairy that had descended from the heavens in this military camp. She was so outstanding. In the cultivation world, any woman with a bit of aptitude would not have bad looks, let alone Farong, who was extremely beautiful. A group of men could not help but want to take a few more glances. However, the state pillar general was strict with his troops, and no one dared to be impudent during training. After walking one round, Yu Qianqiu brought Farong to the central tent. Shi Wenguang and his son, who were discussing military matters, were stunned when they saw Farong. They secretly praised in their hearts, "What a beautiful and delicate woman." Shi Wenguang asked with some doubt, "This young lady is?" "My woman." Yu Qianqiu smiled faintly, then turned to Shi Tian and said, "I'll have to trouble young general to find the old master who helped me change my appearance. I'll trouble him again. Mr. is too polite, I'll go right away." Shi Tian cupped his fists towards Farong and said, "Greetings, madam." Farong was a little scared and shrank back. Yu Qianqiu patted her hand and said, "Don't be afraid, they are all my friends." He then turned to Shi Tian and apologized, "Young general, please don't be offended. She has never been in the secular world before and is afraid to meet strangers." "It's fine." Shi Tian awkwardly cupped his fists and left. Shi Wenguang looked at Farong for a while and saw that her eyes were filled with innocence. Clearly it was as Yu Qianqiu said, she had never seen the world before, so he didn't bother to be polite. He immediately raised his hand and said, "Mr. and Madam, please sit." Yu Qianqiu led Farong to sit on the side and asked, "How are the preparations?" Shi Wenguang walked down and sat opposite the two of them. He replied, "Mr., don't worry, everything has been arranged. Once Mr. goes there, there will naturally be someone to receive you." "Good." Yu Qianqiu nodded. At present, because of the war between the cultivation world and the cultivation world of China, the defense of the borders was quite tight. It was estimated that the cultivation world on both sides had sent cultivation world experts to guard. It would not be easy to fly over without being discovered. Because they were bringing Farong along for safety's sake, Shi Wenguang arranged for a caravan to bring some silver balls over. When the time came, they would naturally be safe. While they were talking, Shi Tian had already brought the old soldier over. Yu Qianqiu immediately arranged for him to measure Farong's face. Although Farong didn't know what to do, she naturally wouldn't object to Yu Qianqiu's arrangement. After the measurements were done, Yu Qianqiu and the old soldier discussed for a long time and finally decided on an inconspicuous design for Farong. Shi Wenguang was speechless. This guy made himself so conspicuous, but he made his woman, cough cough. However, after thinking about it, it was understandable. At this time, if he made a woman too conspicuous, it would definitely attract trouble. Chapter 460. The bright moon hung in the sky, the stars dotted the sky, the world was vast and deep. Not far from the military camp, at the foot of a barren hillside, Yu Qianqiu looked at the 60 people lined up neatly in front of him. He stared for a long time, thinking about how many of these people would survive in the end. However, where there is struggle, there is sacrifice, this is inevitable. Hibiscus hid behind Yu Qianqiu and quietly poked half of her head out, curiously sizing up this group of people. From the fact that this group of people flew close to the ground at high speed without any help, she could tell that they were all experts at the early stage of the crossing calamity realm. What made her most curious was that this group of experts seemed to be very respectful to Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu let go of Hibiscus's hand, walked in front of Gu Qingyun and said with a smile, "I have always admired you, so I gave you a chance. I hope I did not misjudge you." Gu Qingyun slightly bowed, did not say anything. Yu Qianqiu punched his chest, sighed and said, "Work hard, fight hard. One day you will realize that the opportunity one gave you is much better than what Fushin Island gave you." With that said, he waved his hand at everyone and said, "Let's go." He turned around and walked back, pulling Hibiscus up the hillside. Hong Qi shouted from behind, "Master." He ran over, but it was unknown what he wanted to say. Yu Qianqiu said without turning his head, "I have said what I need to say to you. You are not a child anymore, go on your own." Zhang Ping moved in a flash to block in the middle, stretched out his hand to stop them and said, "Senior brother, please go back." Although he was older than Hong Qi, he became his disciple later, so he still had to call him senior brother. Hong Qi helplessly stopped. He turned around and exchanged a glance with Gu Qingyun before nodding. Both of them waved their hands and lightly shouted, "Let's go." The group of people split into two groups and flew in two different directions. Since the border area was guarded by people from the cultivation world, they did not dare to fly too high. On the hillside under the moonlight, the three of them stopped and watched. After everyone disappeared into the night, Yu Qianqiu sighed and said, "Let's go back and rest for the night. We'll set off tomorrow." Although he said he was resting, Yu Qianqiu couldn't fall asleep no matter what. Shi Wenguang gave them a separate place to rest and surrounded it with a fence. Yu Qianqiu was practicing the animal show in the fence as if he was possessed. If he didn't rest, Farong wouldn't be able to. She moved a small military stool and sat under the tent. She supported her chin with her hands and watched curiously. Zhang Peng had been standing guard outside the tent all along, taking the initiative to guard his master. At this moment he was silently watching his master's every move. In his memory, his master had been able to dissolve his attack with a single finger. Until now he had never seen a second person who could do that, and he had always admired him endlessly. Therefore he believed that what his master was practicing now was definitely not something simple, so he watched very carefully. The moonlight shone down on Yu Qianqiu. After practicing for a while inside the fence, he felt the inexplicable feeling of depression in his heart dissipate. He suddenly felt as if there was nothing between heaven and earth. His heart was as calm as still water, and only the scenes of the animal show kept flashing through his mind. The movements he practiced became smoother and smoother. Gradually, his movements became as smooth as floating clouds and flowing water, and a sense of beauty slowly appeared in his movements. This was the first time he found such a comfortable pleasure from practicing the animal show. When he spread his arms, it was as if he was a goshawk patrolling the blue dome of heaven, looking for prey. When he bent his fingers, it was as if he was a mantis that only needed to catch a cicada. That feeling was really wonderful. Farong, who was sitting on the stool, felt that his movements were getting better and better. On the other hand, Zhang Peng's expression gradually became serious. There was a thoughtful look in his eyes, indicating that he seemed to have noticed something. Gradually, there was a trace of surprise in his eyes, and he watched attentively without blinking, as if he was afraid of missing any details. Only when the first rays of dawn appeared, and the neighing of the war horses became chaotic, did Yu Qianqiu wake up from his own world. He only felt that the meridians in his body were incomparably comfortable, and his whole body was also refreshed. After returning to the tent, he took off his sweaty clothes and activated the water art. A clear stream enveloped him and washed him. Dayang Empire's territory was only a few tenths of the size of the Huaxia Empire, but it was one of the countries that had been at war with the Huaxia Empire for a long time. The capital of the empire was called Dayang City. Although it couldn't compare to the capital of Huaxia, it was still very prosperous. After all, it was still the capital of a country. On the bustling main street of the imperial capital, there was an inn called Welcome Inn. In the whole of Dayang City, it couldn't be considered a big inn. Fortunately, the price was fair and business was booming. Today, after several groups of guests who wanted to stay in the inn entered, they all left in disappointment. There was no other reason, but the reason was that someone had booked the entire inn. The inn's backyard was clean and tidy, and it was empty for a group of guests who had suddenly arrived. This group of guests was none other than Yu Qianqiu and his two companions. This inn looked ordinary, but its background was not simple. It was a place that Shi Wenguang had planted here for a long time. The inn's owner was surnamed Sang, and he had long received news from Shi Wenguang. However, he didn't expect that just as he received the news and prepared, the people would arrive without a sound. It was simply unimaginable. However, he knew that there were some things that he shouldn't ask about. He only needed to cooperate with the people who had arrived. After Yu Qianqiu and his companions put on the human skin masks, their appearances had completely changed. Yu Qianqiu himself had long since become a handsome and dashing young master. Shi Wenguang didn't know where in the military camp he had found a folding fan for Yu Qianqiu. Farong, on the other hand, was in a worse state. She was thin to begin with, and her pale complexion made it seem as if she had been ill for a long time. Her appearance was also sloppy and ordinary, completely concealing her beauty. At this moment, in a room in the backyard, a box filled with jade archives was placed on a large table. Yu Qianqiu fanned himself with a folding fan, looking very narcissistic. He took out a jade archive, imbued it with his divine sense, and then reported the name of a country. Farong, who was sprawled in front of the table, took a pen and ticked off the corresponding country's name on the leather scroll. Baiwan Nation. After reporting this name, Yu Qianqiu was slightly taken aback. He recalled that Ziyi had mentioned this country before. It seemed that when Lan Feng, the second strongest expert in the world, resided in this country. He couldn't help but take a closer look. Only then did he realize that when Lan Feng was actually a member of the royal family. The royal family of Baiwan nation was surnamed Wan. Thus, he skimmed through the general situation of the Wan royal family and silently committed it to memory. When he reported Dian nation, he looked through it again. After all, he was now in the imperial city of Dian nation, so he had to understand a little bit more. Farong had already found the box. Seeing that Yu Qianqiu was reading attentively, she didn't disturb him. She bit the tip of her pen and waited quietly. The royal family of Dian nation is surnamed Zhao. Yu Qianqiu muttered. He put down the scroll in his hand and took out another jade archive to report. After spending the entire morning, the two of them finally went through all the jade archives. At the same time, Yu Qianqiu's mind was filled with many things. After putting the jade archives away, Yu Qianqiu asked, "See if there are any countries that haven't been ticked off?" Farong eagerly hugged the cowhide scroll and easily found it. She pointed to the two countries at the top of the scroll and said, "The Huaxia Empire and the Tuan Empire." Yu Qianqiu leaned over to take a look. The Huaxia Empire was first and the Tuan Empire was second. This list of countries was arranged according to the size of their territories. In other words, the Tuan Empire was the country with the largest territory among all the foreign countries. Yu Qianqiu tapped his finger on the Tuan Empire's name. He chuckled coldly and said, "I've been looking for a long time. So it's you." Farong turned to look at him. She didn't know why he was looking for the Tuan Empire. Just then someone outside suddenly said, "It's almost noon. I wonder what my esteemed guests would like to eat? Please let me know so that I can prepare in advance." "Is that Boss Sang?" Yu Qianqiu took the cowhide scroll from the table and tossed it into his storage pouch. He walked over to open the door and saw Zhang Peng blocking the boss's way. Zhang Peng was a huge man to begin with. His block blocked the entire door. When he saw his master come out, he quickly moved to the side. Yu Qianqiu gently fanned himself. He looked at the amiable middle-aged man in front of him. No matter how he looked at him, he looked like a businessman. Who would have thought that he was a spy? Yu Qianqiu's smiling eyes revealed a sense of scrutiny. Occasionally he would reveal a sharp and threatening glint. The aura of a superior was faintly discernible. It was as if he viewed human lives as nothing more than grass. Mortals were indeed nothing in his eyes. Boss Sang felt a chill run down his spine under his gaze. He thought to himself, "Oh my." He didn't know who this person was. One look and he could tell that he was someone who had been through a lot of bloodshed. Moreover, he was the kind of person who wielded power. Boss Sang might be a small boss in the marketplace, but he was used to seeing all kinds of people in the marketplace. When it came to judging people, ordinary people couldn't compare to him. At the same time, he also knew that this person had an extraordinary background. Otherwise, he wouldn't have received a secret order so quickly. Moreover, the secret order was even stamped with the great general's personal seal. "Sir." Boss Sang nodded and bowed with a smile. Then he quickly glanced at Zhang Peng. Judging from his strong physique, the calluses on his hands, and the look in his eyes, which were used to seeing life and death, this person was most likely from the military. "As for the food, you can make it as you see fit." Yu Qianqiu smiled faintly and folded his fan. He pointed to the courtyard and said, "Just set it up here. I'll have a few drinks with Boss Sang and ask him some questions." "I wouldn't dare." "Sir, please ask away." Boss Sang smiled respectfully. Zhang Peng snorted coldly. "Just do as Sir says. What's with all the nonsense?" "Zhang Peng, don't be rude." Yu Qianqiu reprimanded. Zhang Peng slightly folded his hands and said nothing, but his eyes were still fixed on Boss Sang. Boss Sang immediately nodded and said, "Very well. We'll do as Sir says. I'll go prepare now." With that, he turned around and quickly left. Yu Qianqiu watched him leave. Just as he was about to turn around and enter the house, he suddenly heard the sound of an argument coming from outside. Then he heard the sound of things being smashed and Boss Sang's kind words of advice. He couldn't help but frown. Zhang Ping bowed and said, "Sir, I'll go take a look." Before they came, they had already discussed it. Master had changed the way he addressed Boss Sang to Sir. There was no need for him to look. A dozen or so valiant black-clothed servants had already barged into the courtyard through the curved door. A handsome young man in snow-white clothes slowly walked out from the crowd, waving a white folding fan in his hand. Yu Qianqiu exchanged a glance with him. Both of them were slightly stunned and subconsciously looked at the folding fan in their hands. Chapter 461. Swoosh. Yu Qianqiu opened the folding fan in his hand. "My fan is bigger than yours and it's even golden in color." A faint sneer appeared on his face. The young man in white was taken aback, but he wasn't attracted by the fan. Instead, his gaze lingered on Yu Qianzhou's face for a moment. This was the first time he had seen such a handsome person. His gaze then fell on the fan in the young man's hand and he blurted out, "Vulgar." His voice was a little sweet. Although he was pretending to be a man, it couldn't conceal his femininity. Yu Qianzhou and Zhang Peng looked at each other. They weren't angered by his words. Instead, they began to scrutinize the young man. As they expected, the woman's features were very obvious. Her skin was fair and tender, her earlobes were pierced, and she didn't have an Adam's apple on her neck. As expected, she was a fake. Judging by her appearance, she was a rather good-looking fake. Yu Qianzhou noticed something even more interesting. When the fake was waving her fan, he noticed a thumb-sized lifelike dark green orchid embroidered on her sleeve. If he remembered correctly, the Jade archive he had read about Baiwan country showed that the symbol of Baiwan country's royalty was the exact same dark green orchid. Especially the fake's white fan. There was even a large Wen character written on it. Who was this girl in Baiwan country's royalty? Why would a member of Baiwan country's royalty come all the way here to stay in a small inn? Yu Qianzhou was deep in thought. At that moment, Boss Sang finally managed to squeeze his way into the courtyard. He first ran over to Yu Qianzhou and said respectfully, "Sir, please forgive me for disturbing your rest." He then ran over to the young man and cupped his fists saying, "Miss, this inn has been booked. Please take a few steps downstairs. There are several other inns." "Were you calling a miss?" The young man shouted in a masculine voice. She refused to admit it. Little did she know anyone could tell that she was a woman. Several guards dressed as servants came up to her. "I was blind. Please forgive me, young master." Boss Sang apologized profusely. A middle-aged man next to the young master took a step forward and said in a deep voice, "Seeing that your shop is quiet and clean, my young master has given face to stay here. Don't be ungrateful. You have 15 minutes to clear out all the unrelated people. Otherwise you can close your shop." Zhang Peng was infuriated when he heard this. He was just about to take a step when Yu Qianzhou stopped him with his fan. Yu Qianzhou raised his eyebrows. It seemed that because of his arrival the inn was cleaned up from top to bottom, and it brought trouble to them instead. The middle-aged man who just spoke was actually an early-stage nascent soul cultivator. To be able to have a nascent soul cultivator as a guard, it seemed like this fake was undoubtedly a member of the royal family of Baiwan country. Boss Sang helplessly apologized, "Esteemed guests, please don't make things difficult for me. This shop is open for business and I've already accepted their money. How can I chase a guest out? There's no such thing." The middle-aged man raised his chin at Yu Qianzhou and said, "How much did they pay you?" "We'll double it." This. Boss Sang still wanted to explain, but someone behind him shouted, 10,000 taels of gold. "If you can take out 20,000 taels of gold, we'll move out immediately." Boss Sang turned around. Seeing that Yu Qianzhou had spoken, he simply retreated to the side and stopped talking. The crowd's gazes all fell on Yu Qianzhou. The young man in white glared at him and shouted, "Do you think I'm ignorant? Renting this shop for a day costs 100 taels of silver. Who would spend 10,000 taels of gold?" "I said 10,000 taels of gold, so it's 10,000 taels of gold." Yu Qianzhou said indifferently, "Didn't you say you'll pay double? Don't pretend to be rich if you don't have money. Get out of here and don't disturb my rest." "Are you purposely looking for trouble?" The middle-aged man's tone was indifferent as he slowly walked over. It seemed that he wanted to teach Yu Qianzhou a lesson. Zhang Peng clenched his fists. Zhang Peng clenched his fists. He had long wanted to teach these people a lesson. Yu Qianzhou gently folded his fan and said indifferently, "A mere early-stage nascent soul cultivator dares to behave atrociously in front of me? You're courting death." His words immediately caused the middle-aged man to stop in his tracks. His face was filled with shock as he asked, You're also a cultivator?" The fact that the other party could see through his cultivation meant that the other party's cultivation was above his. Then he looked at the towering man. The way he looked at him was extremely disdainful. It was obvious that the other party had seen through him as well. On the other hand, he couldn't even tell that these two were cultivators. It was obvious that their cultivation was much higher than his. "What? Do you have a problem with that?" Yu Qianzhou asked coldly. "Who are you? How dare you speak so arrogantly? Guards, open your mouth." The man in white robe angrily spoke in a bureaucratic tone. A few guards quickly rushed over. The middle-aged man spread his arms and shouted, "Stop! Back down." The guards were obviously extremely afraid of him. After being shouted at, they quickly stopped and bowed before retreating. The man in white robe was slightly stunned. He didn't understand why the man was suddenly afraid. This man was not a cultivator. How could he know what it meant to see through the other party's cultivation? The middle-aged man quickly apologized to Yu Qianqiu. "Mister, please forgive us. Our young master is ignorant and has disturbed you. We will leave now." "You want to leave just like that after bullying me?" Yu Qianqiu asked indifferently. The middle-aged man turned around. His face was slightly angry as he said in a deep voice, "I can see that Mister's cultivation is profound. I will respect Mister. If Mister is aggressive, I will not be afraid of trouble. Once we start fighting, the experts in Dayang City will come immediately. At that time, I don't know who will be embarrassed." He was right. With Wen Lanfeng's status as the second in the cultivation world, few people in the world would dare to not give them face except for Bai Changchun. But coincidentally, they met Bai Changchun's disciple. This was called, enemies would not meet unless they were enemies. Interesting. Wen Lanfeng's disciples and grand disciples actually dare to threaten me. Yu Qianqiu sneered. His words left everyone at a loss, including the white-clothed young master. She obviously didn't know who the Wen Lanfeng that Yu Qianqiu spoke of was. Yu Qianqiu was secretly depressed. He thought, did I misjudge? The middle-aged man was stunned for a long time. He asked in a surprised voice, Mister, do you know our ancestor? Fortunately. Yu Qianqiu heaved a sigh of relief. Causing trouble here was indeed not a good idea. Although he wasn't afraid of anything, Shi Wenguang must have had a hard time setting up an ambush in an enemy nation. If he messed it up, then he would be letting Shi Wenguang down. He waved his fan disapprovingly and said, "We haven't seen each other for many years, but we still have some friendship. I wonder if you can tell me your name so that I know which senior showed mercy to me. I can report this to my superiors when I return," the middle-aged man said respectfully with a shocked expression. He had already bowed so deeply that he was almost touching the ground. Although the person in front of him looked young, how could the cultivation world judge one's age by appearance? It wouldn't be too much of a problem if the other party was acquainted with the old ancestor, but the other party was actually saying that he was acquainted with the old ancestor. The old ancestor was already a deity transformation final stage cultivator, so those who were acquainted with him were most likely deity transformation final stage cultivators. When he thought that he might have offended a master in the soul formation stage, he couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. He had indeed been a little careless with his words. If the other party wanted to kill them, they wouldn't even know how they died, let alone wait for help. Yu Qianqiu folded the fan in his hand and said sternly, "If it weren't for the fact that you're from the Wanbi Nation's Wen clan, none of you would be able to leave here today." Boss Sang narrowed his eyes and quickly swept his gaze over these people. So these people were from the royal family of Baiwan Nation. No wonder they were so arrogant. The white-robed man and his guards looked at each other. It turned out that the other party had already seen through their identities. The middle-aged man bowed again and said, "Thank you for showing mercy, senior. Thank you for showing mercy. Go back and tell that old man Wen Lanfeng that he has taught a bunch of good disciples to bully an old friend of mine from the South Sea. I'd like to see if he can still hide in Baiwan Nation. Tell old man Wen Lanfeng to personally come to the South Sea to apologize to me. Otherwise, don't blame me for tearing down Baiwan Nation's palace." Yu Qianqiu boasted shamelessly. These words were earth-shattering to the ears of everyone present. Although the white-robed man and his guards didn't know who this so-called Wen Lanfeng was, they knew they had offended someone they couldn't afford to offend. Otherwise, who would dare say something like tearing down Baiwan Nation's palace? They were all dumbfounded. Zhang Peng had always been a calm person, but when he heard these words, he was completely confused. Could it be that master had territory in the South Sea? Boss Sang was even more speechless. Wow. Just who were these honored guests of the general? They wanted to tear down Baiwan Nation's palace just because they were unhappy. This was incredible. No wonder the general personally stamped a secret order and urgently sent it over. The middle-aged man opened his mouth and asked with a trembling voice, "Sir, are you from the South Sea Purple Bamboo Forest? How dare you? Don't say what you shouldn't say. Tell old man Wen Lanfeng he will naturally know who I am." Yu Qianqiu reprimanded. Yes. The middle-aged man answered repeatedly, cold sweat breaking out on his forehead. As Wen Lanfeng's disciples and grand disciples, how many of them didn't know who Wen Lanfeng's old friend from the South Sea was? The famous Mr. Nongzhu from the South Sea Purple Bamboo Forest was Wen Lanfeng's savior. If it weren't for Mr. Nongzhu, Wen Lanfeng would have died in the hands of the world's #1 expert, Bai Changchun. If it weren't for Mr. Nongzhu, Baiwan Nation would have been annexed by the surrounding countries after Wen Lanfeng's death. Most importantly, it was said that Mr. Nongzhu's cultivation had reached the middle stage of soul formation. An ordinary cultivator couldn't afford to offend him. So, damn it, Mr. Nongzhu was a famous handsome man in the cultivation world. The man in front of him was unusually handsome and looked similar to the rumors. If he had thought of this earlier, he wouldn't have caused such a ruckus. The middle-aged man's intestines turned green with regret. If he really brought Mr. Nongzhu's words back, he would probably die. Chapter 462. What did Wen Lanfeng mean to Baiwan country? He was a national artifact, the treasure of the country. Although Wen Lanfeng had stopped meddling in secular affairs for a long time, as long as Wen Lanfeng was alive, Baiwan country would not decline. This was an undeniable fact. He had humiliated the savior of the country's great ancestor. Moreover, he was a middle-stage divine transformation expert. If he brought this back, he would be killed. Even His Majesty, the current emperor, would not be able to keep the little princess safe. The middle-aged man looked back at the white-robed man sadly. The most terrifying thing was that Mr. Nongzhu wanted the great ancestor to go to the South Sea to apologize. Who in the entire royal family would dare to disturb the great ancestor's meditation, let alone the fact that he could not see the great ancestor? To say the least, even if someone could see the great ancestor, who would dare to ask the great ancestor to go to the South Sea to apologize? There was no one in the entire Baiwan country who would dare to do so. But if they did not do so, Mr. Nongzhu would tear down the palace of Baiwan country. Apart from the great ancestor, who in Baiwan country could stop Mr. Nongzhu, who was famous in the cultivation world? Once the great ancestor was alarmed, the consequences would be unimaginable. No matter how he thought about it, it was a dead end. The middle-aged man's face was ashen. He was so scared that he broke out in a cold sweat. He stood still like a wooden chicken. Uncle Bai, who is he? The white-robed man walked over, trembling with fear. He glanced at Yu Qianqiu and asked cautiously, "How dare you say I'm vulgar?" Yu Qianqiu glanced at him and waved the big fan in his hand. He had the demeanor of an expert. "Shut up, kneel." The middle-aged man shouted at the white-robed man. Then he knelt down in front of Yu Qianqiu and pleaded, "Please spare our lives for the sake of our great ancestor. I will be very grateful." The white-robed man looked incredulous when he saw the middle-aged man kneeling down. He was stunned for a moment and then knelt down obediently. When these two people knelt down, the dozen or so guards behind them didn't dare to continue standing. With a hua sound, they all knelt down. Boss Sang was even more shocked now. He could tell that this group of people was undoubtedly the royal family of Baiwan Nation. This lady dressed as a man might even be a princess of Baiwan Nation. Now, just because of a few words from this gentleman, all of them actually knelt down and asked for forgiveness? Southern Sea Purple Bamboo Forest? What kind of place is this? Boss Sang thought to himself. He had never heard of such a place before. On the other hand, Zhang Peng admired his master more and more. His master was indeed an unfathomable person. His heart was filled with worship. Furong, who had been standing nervously behind the door, thinking that something was going to happen, was astonished when she saw this scene. She didn't expect Yu Qianqiu to be so capable after leaving Fuxin Island. He could make a bunch of people kneel down with just a few words. At the same time, she felt more at ease, so she bit her lips and stood behind Yu Qianqiu. What's the meaning of this? Yu Qianqiu waved his fan and said indifferently, "I didn't say I want your lives. Get up quickly lest someone sees you and accuses me of bullying the weak." In his heart, he muttered, "I didn't expect the handsome Nongzhu to be so popular outside. It seems I can make good use of him. Who told you to always bully me? I'm Wen Bai. I've long heard that Mr. likes to play games in the mortal world. I didn't expect to offend you today." The middle-aged man said while kowtowing repeatedly, "I should go back to receive my punishment, but I didn't dare to disturb the old ancestors' cultivation. I hope that Senior will let this matter go since we don't know anything." He gritted his teeth and threw caution to the wind. Instead of going back to receive his death, he might as well pluck up his courage and try. Perhaps there would be a chance. That's exactly what I wanted. If that Wen Lanfeng really comes out, I'm afraid it'll be hard to clean up. Yu Qianqiu raised his brows and turned to look at Furong. He asked softly, "Did I scare you? What do you think we should do?" Everyone's eyes immediately focused on the sickly Furong. They didn't expect the final decision to be made by this inconspicuous woman. Wenbai looked at her with a pleading expression. As Yu Qianshou expected, Furong was soft-hearted and couldn't do anything evil. She gently pulled his sleeve and said, "Forget it." The group of people immediately heaved a sigh of relief. However, they only saw Yu Qianshou closing his fan as he solemnly said, "I can overlook this matter and treat it as if nothing had happened. However, you all used your strength to bully others and destroyed the inn's items. Because of me, the inn suffered losses for nothing. I will punish you all to compensate heavily. Do you all accept this?" "Yes, yes, yes." Wenbai quickly got up and went to Boss Sang. He cupped his hands and apologized. "I'm really sorry. May I know how much the broken things will be worth? I'm willing to pay double the amount as compensation." Boss Sang was speechless. However, the broken bowls and plates really weren't worth much. He couldn't help but glance at Yu Qianshou. Yu Qianshou immediately said without any trace of politeness, "Since I've spoken up to seek justice for them, 1,000 taels of gold is worth it." Wenbai was stunned. He quickly nodded and said, "It's worth it. Mister's words are priceless. Even 10,000 taels of gold is worth it." He quickly took out the storage pouch from his robes and used his divine sense to check, but found that it wasn't enough. He called for the guards to gather the money, but found that it was still not enough. He had no choice but to ask the young master to hand over the pouch as well. After gathering everything, Wenbai finally returned with a bitter expression. "Mister, please wait a moment. There's only about 800 taels of gold here. I'll go to the embassy to get it. Forget it. If I continue to be long-winded with you all, it'll seem like I'm calculative." Yu Qianshou interrupted with a wave of his fan. He then pointed at the storage pouch in Wenbai's hand to Zhang Peng. Zhang Peng walked over and grabbed the pouch. "Thank you, mister." Wenbai bowed and said. This matter had come to an end. His worried heart could finally be at ease. It could be considered a blessing in a misfortune. "Don't kneel. Let's go. Do you want me to treat you all to a meal?" Yu Qianshou said with an expressionless face. The group of people quickly stood up. The young master in white pouted and silently bowed with a wronged expression. Wenbai was about to leave when he saw Yu Qianshou point the fan in his hand at the young master in white. He said, "What's the name of this cross-dressing girl?" "Wenqing." The young master in white pouted and replied unwillingly. Wenbai saw this and thought to himself, "Oh no. Look at the situation now and you're still acting like a princess. Why don't you look at who you're facing? Even your father can't afford to offend you." Sure enough, Yu Qianshou tapped the fan in his other hand lightly. He said in a neutral tone, "Looking at you, you seem to have a lot of opinions about my decision. If you're not convinced, why don't you say it now? I hate it when people curse me behind my back." Wenqing wouldn't dare. The young master in white had now completely reverted to her female voice. Although she said she wouldn't dare, everyone could hear the grievance in her voice. Yu Qianshou tapped the fan lightly. His gaze fell on the golden headband in her hair and he slowly walked over. Wenbai was startled. He cupped his fists and said, "Sir?" As soon as the words left his mouth, Yu Qianshou glared at him and swallowed them. Yu Qianshou walked up to the silent Wenqing. He extended his fan and gently lifted her chin. He looked at the beautiful face that dared to be angry but did not dare to speak. He said, "You can be considered a beauty. Why do you like to cross-dress? Take off the headband and let me see." Zhang Peng was stunned. Boss Sang was stunned. Wenbai was stunned. The guards looked at each other. Could it be that he had taken a fancy to Wenqing? Furong blinked. She did not know what he was trying to do. The Wenqing's pretty face turned red. She bit her lips so hard that it almost bled. She did not say anything, nor did she move. She was a dignified princess of a country. When had she ever been humiliated like this? And in front of so many people? Little did she know that Yu Qianshou wanted to take her pride down a notch. The fan lifted her chin again. Yu Qianshou said indifferently, "Do you want me to do it myself? If you don't take it off, I'll have him do it. Once he takes it off for you, I'll give you to him to warm his bed." The fan let go of her chin and pointed at Zhang Peng. "Thank you, sir." Zhang Peng cupped his fists and bowed. He strode over. Who would have thought that this guy liked to play dry humor? The Wenqing immediately shouted in horror, "I'll take it off." She quickly took off the golden headband and angrily threw it on the ground. However, as soon as she threw it, Yu Qianshou seemed to have guessed what she was going to do. He stretched out the fan in his hand and flicked it. The golden headband flipped towards Zhang Peng. Zhang Peng casually caught it. As the saying goes, the layman enjoys the show, while the connoisseur recognizes the artistry. Yu Qianzhou's casual flick of the fan seemed to be something that anyone could do. However, what was rare was that it seemed natural. It was as if the wenching had cooperated with him and purposely threw the golden headband towards his fan. The group of guards' pupils shrank. They all praised in their hearts. What amazing skills. Wenbai was secretly shocked. As expected of a soul formation expert. Just a casual move was enough to predict the enemy's movements. Zhang Peng, however, did not think much of it. Master's skills were amazing. In fact, Yu Qianzhou himself was stunned. Just now he had subconsciously done it. He didn't even move his body. He had just casually moved his arm and fan. He hadn't expected that the size of the fan would be so perfect. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that it was exquisite. He did not even know how he did it. In a flash, he remembered what Bai Changchun said when he taught him the animal play. He was overjoyed. Old man Bai did not lie to him. The wenching stood there with her hair disheveled. In the blink of an eye, the handsome young master had changed. Especially her eyes, which were already welling with tears. She was trying hard not to cry. Yu Qianzhou raised the fan in his hand and parted the messy hair on her forehead. Her beautiful face, rosy cheeks and tearful cheeks were really pitiful. She was indeed a great beauty. All right, you can go. Yu Qianzhou expressionlessly said as he held the fan and knocked on the wenching's forehead. Thank you, sir. Wenbai bowed awkwardly. He then scolded the wenching, hurry up and thank sir. He was really afraid of causing trouble again. Thank you, sir. The wenching was full of grievances. As soon as she finished speaking, she immediately burst into tears and ran away. The group of guards quickly bowed and left to chase after her. Chapter 463. Without the group of people, the courtyard became much quieter. There were only a few sparrows chirping on an old tree in the corner. Yu Qianzhou opened his folding fan and waved it gently. He stared expressionlessly at the sparrows hopping about on the tree branch. He truly had the demeanor of an expert. Boss Sang walked over and said respectfully, "Please wait a moment, sir. The food and wine will be ready soon." Yu Qianzhou grunted softly and didn't mention the gold again. After he walked out of the courtyard, Zhang Peng took the initiative to hand over the storage bag. Yu Qianzhou put it away and pretended that nothing had happened. He had a lot of spirit stones on him and didn't have much gold or silver in the secular world. Since someone had taken the initiative to give him money, he could use it to accompany Hibiscus. Not long after, a waiter brought over a square table and placed it in the center of the courtyard along with a chair. Piping hot food and wine were served one after another. It was an exceptionally sumptuous meal. Boss Sang told the waiter not to disturb them and invited the three to take a seat. He wanted to stand to the side and keep them company, but Yu Qianzhou told him not to be overly courteous. Boss Sang sat down with some trepidation, and the four of them sat around the table. After tasting a few cups of wine, Yu Qianzhou said, "Boss Sang, there's no need to stand. Relax and sit. Let me ask you, did something happen in Dayang City?" Boss Sang thought for a moment and said, "Nothing happened? Ever since Dayang and Huaxia stopped fighting, Dayang City has been unprecedentedly stable. No more able-bodied men are needed. After the war, the people are living and working in peace. Nothing major has happened." Once he said this, he was no longer as nervous. Hibiscus quietly ate by herself, occasionally glancing at Yu Qianzhou with satisfaction. Zhang Ping wasn't so pretentious. He listened as he ate and didn't hesitate to grab food with his hands. He really didn't treat himself as an outsider. Boss Sang didn't dare to be too presumptuous. If the gentleman opposite him didn't move his chopsticks, he definitely wouldn't. Yu Qianzhou picked up some food for Furong with his chopsticks and said doubtfully, "That's strange. The distance between Baiwan Nation and Dayan Nation isn't short. The princess of Baiwan Nation disguised herself as a man and came all the way here with her guards. Did she come here just to have fun?" "Sir, now that you mention it, I do recall something. I wonder if it has anything to do with this." Boss Sang nodded slightly. "Feel free to speak your mind." Yu Qianzhou smiled. 3 days later, the beloved daughter of His Majesty the Emperor of the Dayang Kingdom, 3rd Princess Zhao Qinxiang, will compete in martial arts to find a husband. During this period of time, many nobles from various countries have arrived. "I wonder if the arrival of Baiwan Nation's princess has anything to do with this matter?" Boss Sang said. "Could it be that this girl wants to disguise herself as a man and become the prince consort?" Yu Qianzhou was stunned. He didn't think that it was possible. After all, this wasn't a movie. He asked again, "Why is the dignified princess of Dayan Kingdom looking for a husband?" Could it be that the Emperor of Dian Kingdom can't find a good husband for her? This Princess Zhao Qinxiang is a widow who has yet to marry. At this point, Boss Sang said with some pride, her husband was originally a general. Unfortunately, he was unlucky. Just a few days before the wedding, he was killed by a valiant general from Huaxia during the last battle. Zhang Peng, who was chewing on a lamb leg, was slightly stunned. He interrupted, then the third princess's husband is called Chu Xiong? Yes. Boss Sang slapped the table with some excitement and said, he is indeed called Chu Xiong. That fellow is considered a valiant general in the Dayang Kingdom. Unfortunately, he ran into our great general's #1 valiant general. The last sentence was said in a very low tone, clearly afraid that outsiders would hear. Yu Qianqiu looked at Zhang Peng and asked suspiciously, what? You know Chu Xiong? Zhang Peng put down the lamb leg in his hand and said with a mischievous smile, sir, you may not know this, but when we fought against the Dayang Kingdom, I was the vanguard. The last battle was also fought by me. Chu Xiong was also killed by me when I fought him. Then you have to take responsibility for the widow. Yu Qianqiu raised his wine cup and teased. Zhang Peng laughed mischievously, I haven't married her yet. As long as she is willing, I will accompany her at any time. I am not even afraid of her man, so why would I be afraid of her? The two of them were having some fun and joking. Boss Sang's face was full of shock as he said, Zhang Peng? Zhang Peng? I should have guessed long ago. You are the #1 general under the great general, General Zhang Peng. But, didn't you violate military discipline and be beheaded by the great general? Zhang Peng looked at Yu Qianqiu and nodded with a smile. I was supposed to be beheaded to uphold military discipline, but I just so happened to run into Sir. Sir, you saved me from my blade. Boss Sang, it is enough for you to know this. Don't tell anyone else. I wouldn't dare. When I heard the news of the general's beheading, I didn't know how long I had been heartbroken. Now that I know that the general is still alive, I won't tell anyone. Boss Sang was pleasantly surprised. It was obvious that these spies placed in enemy countries by the army were very respectful towards their homeland and the brave generals in the army. Zhang Peng waved his hand and said, don't call me general. I have followed Sir for many years and have long since stopped calling me that. Boss Sang repeatedly agreed. Zhang Peng, do you want to meet the widow princess? Yu Qianqiu suddenly asked with a smile. Although Hibiscus had little contact with the outside world, she could still understand what they were saying. At this moment she was chewing on some vegetables and staring unblinkingly at Zhang Peng. Zhang Peng's mind was a little muddled. He was stunned for a long time and hesitantly said, Sir, do you want me to have a martial arts competition to select the emperor's son-in-law? Boss Sang's mouth went round in a circle. When two countries faced off against each other, he killed the fiancée of someone else and then broke into the enemy country to marry his fiancée. When he came back to his senses, he tried to dissuade him. Sir, I'm afraid that won't do. After all, the princess of Dayang is a princess. This martial arts competition to select the emperor's son-in-law must be someone of status. I'm afraid ordinary people don't have the qualifications to sign up. That's simple. I'll go find those people from Baiwan country and ask for a high-ranking Baiwan country status. It's just a registration. I don't think it'll be a difficult matter. Yu Qianqiu smiled faintly. Zhang Peng asked in a daze, Sir, do you really want me to go? He was a little confused. Why did they want to meddle in worldly affairs? What? Are you afraid? Yu Qianqiu smiled. With Sir here, what's there to be afraid of? Zhang Peng wiped his oily mouth and grinned. I just think it's a little too exciting. Alright then, it's settled. After we finish eating, I'll go find the people from Baiwan country. Yu Qianqiu smiled as he poured the wine in his cup into his mouth. Sir, that. Zhang Peng said shyly, what if I'm really selected as the emperor's son-in-law? Do I really have to become the emperor's son-in-law? Are you stupid? We're just going to join in the fun. If you don't like the princess, you can find an opportunity to be defeated by your opponent. Isn't this a martial arts competition for a spouse? Yu Qianqiu paused. Of course, if you like the princess and want to have a taste of her bed, I won't object. Hearing this, Zhang Peng and Boss Sang looked at each other and smiled knowingly. Hibiscus, who had food in her mouth, struggled to swallow it. She stared at them and asked curiously, Is the princess's bed very comfortable? The three men, who had just raised their cups to each other and had wine in their mouths, all spat it out when they heard this. Yu Qianqiu coughed twice and said awkwardly, I don't know either. If you want to try, I'll find an opportunity to take you there. Hibiscus smiled with an eager expression. Yu Qianqiu hurriedly picked food for her and stuffed her mouth so that she wouldn't say anything scary. He had a reason for asking Zhang Ping to compete for the emperor's son-in-law. For a long time, the Huaxia cultivation world had a sense of seclusion. Basically, they didn't have any contact with the foreign cultivation world. They knew very little about the foreign cultivation world, almost nothing at all. Right now, he urgently needed to find an entry point to the cultivation world so that he could gather some information. It would be best if he could open up a path. It seemed that the cultivation world of the various countries here had a close relationship with the royal family. Letting Zhang Ping participate in the martial arts competition to select the emperor's son-in-law was a good opportunity to make contact with the cultivation world of the various countries. The western suburbs of Dayang City were where the embassies of the various countries that had diplomatic relations with Dayang Nation were located. Baiwan Nation's embassy was naturally located here as well. It wasn't small, and it was a very grand and imposing mansion. In fact, the embassies of the various countries were built in an imposing manner. The purpose was none other than to show their country's powerful image. The dozen or so guards standing guard in front of Baiwan Nation's embassy suddenly saw a man with disheveled hair rushing over. They were about to shout at him to retreat with their weapons. However, when they saw the group of people behind the man, they immediately moved aside, allowing the man with disheveled hair to run in while wailing loudly. Soon after, the group of people followed him in. The man who was wailing loudly was naturally the hipster who had been greatly humiliated. After he ran in, the servants and the envoys who came and went were at a loss of what to do. The hipster directly rushed into the main hall, whose doors were wide open. When he saw a middle-aged man with a dignified aura sitting upright and talking to someone beside him, he immediately burst into tears. Uncle Wang, I've been bullied. You have to help me. Wah. He was crying his heart out. The group of people in the hall were startled by the man with disheveled hair. When they heard who it was, they were all stunned. The dignified middle-aged man jumped to his feet. When he saw the hipster's disheveled appearance, his expression darkened. What on earth is going on? The group of people also stood up with sullen expressions. How could the dignified princess of Baiwan Nation be bullied? Especially in a foreign country, this was simply an insult to the country's image. The hipster with disheveled hair wiped away his tears. He turned around and pointed at Wenbai who was outside and cried, "Ask him." Once the dozen or so guards arrived at the entrance of the main hall, they immediately scattered to the sides. This was not a place they could enter casually. Wenbai walked in and cupped his hands at the man above him. The man also cupped his hands in return. "Brother Wenbai, what on earth is going on? With you by her side, how could Qing be bullied? How do you want me to explain this to my brother when I return?" "Your Highness, don't mention this again." Wenbai walked up to him and whispered in his ear, "Just now, the princess offended someone we can't afford to offend." What a joke. The prince slammed the table beside him and sneered. "Not many people in the world dare to bully the royal family of Baiwan Nation. Please calm down, Your Highness." Wenbai shook his head and smiled bitterly. He whispered again. This time, the person the princess offended was Mr. Nongzhu of the South Sea Purple Bamboo Forest. It's already good enough that we can come back alive. What? It's him? The prince was immediately dumbfounded. He looked at the crying hipster with an indescribable expression. Chapter 464. The prince's name was Wen Yuan, and he was the younger brother of the current emperor of Baiwan Kingdom. Ordinary members of the royal family might not know the secrets of the royal family, but how could he, one of the top figures of the royal family, not know the history of the Wen family? It was precisely because of this that he was shocked. The hidden old ancestor was a peerless expert with mysterious means. It was because of his fame that the Wen family had established its current status in Baiwan Kingdom. Who was Mr. Nongzhu? He was one of the few friends of the old ancestor. It was said that he was also a peerless expert with mysterious means. There was also a legend that Mr. Nongzhu was the old ancestor's benefactor. This matter involved the old ancestor's romantic past, and it was strictly forbidden to spread within the royal family. When Yu Yuan glanced at the still crying scholar and swept his eyes over the people on the left and right sides of the hall. These people were the relatives of the royal family and some meritorious officials who came with the team. He waved his hand at them and said, "You can leave for now." The group of people saluted and left the hall. However, there was a young man who looked similar to the prince who did not leave. He was hesitant and seemed to have something to say. This person was the prince's second son, Wen Chongzheng. When Yu Yuan frowned slightly and said, "Chongzheng, do you have something else?" When Chongjing said respectfully, "Father, I want to stay and listen to what is going on. I want to see if I can help you." How dare he disobey his father's order? When Yu Yuan raised his eyebrows and swallowed the reprimand that was at the tip of his tongue. This youngest son was born of a concubine. Because he was born of a concubine, it was not his turn to inherit the throne. That was why there was this trip to Dian Kingdom. Baiwan Kingdom had a cruel rule for the royal family. Because Baiwan Kingdom's territory was not very large, in order to suppress the spread of royal family members, each royal family could only have one descendant to inherit the title. Once the others were married, they would be demoted to commoners. Normally, even if these people were demoted to commoners, they would still have a background. But unfortunately, because of that cruel rule, no one wanted to give up on the inheritance of the title, and the internal strife between the brothers continued unabated. Imagine, after someone inherited the title and gained power, how could he let go of his former enemies? Therefore, many people who lost the right to inherit had a very bleak ending. No one dared to change the iron law set by the ancestors. It was precisely because when Yu Yuan did not want to see the situation of his two sons killing each other that he had allowed the dignified prince to run for the emperor's son-in-law. He hoped that he would be able to protect both his wealth and his life. This was also a last resort. Most of the people in the hall had come for this reason. When Yu Yuan wanted to reject his son's request, but he couldn't bear to say it out loud, Wen Bai, who was at the side, knew that it was hard for him to say. He glanced at Wen Chongjing and said with a faint smile, "Your Highness, after all, the literati already know about it. It's fine even if Chongjing knows about it. I believe that Chongjing will not spread it." Although his surname was Wen, he had been adopted by the Wen family since he was young because of his talent for cultivation. He was not a true blood relative of the Wen family, but he was one of the protectors of the Wen family. When Chongjing, who had his head slightly lowered, had a calm expression on his face. His fists, which were hidden in his sleeves, were tightly clenched. His nails had already sunk deep into his flesh. Just because he was born of a concubine and not a legitimate son, he wasn't even given a chance to be filial? "Father, aren't you a little too ruthless?" When Yu Yuan's gaze swept past his son, and he did not look at him directly. He asked Wen Bai, "What is going on? Mr. Nongzhu is a mysterious person. How did you offend him? Brother Wen Bai, can you really confirm that he is Mr. Nongzhu?" When the words Mr. Nongzhu came out, Wen Chongjing's eyebrows twitched involuntarily. Others might think that he did not know who Mr. Nongzhu was, but he had unintentionally heard of this person. He was a person with great magical power. No wonder even the princess had to suffer. The princess insisted on going out to experience the customs of the Daong kingdom, so she picked a relatively clean inn and prepared to stay. Who knew that the inn had already been booked by Mr. Nongzhu? Wen Bai immediately roughly explained what had happened. Because when Chongjing was present, he decided to leave the details to the prince alone. Unexpectedly, the tearful literati wiped his tears and said, "Uncle, who is that person? He could tell that we are the royal family of the Baiwan kingdom, but he actually dared to force Qing to kneel and admit her mistake. Also, who in the royal family is Wen Lanfeng? Why have I never heard of him?" That person kept saying that he wanted Wen Lanfeng to personally go to the South Sea to apologize to him, or he would tear down the palace of the Baiwan kingdom. He was so arrogant, but Uncle Bai still sided with him and bullied Qing together. "Whoa!" She cried again. Her tone seemed to be complaining, but the listener was listening attentively. Wen Bai smiled bitterly. He originally wanted to leave these words to Wen Yuan, but who knew that she would spill it all out? Wen Yuan's scalp tingled. He naturally knew that the elder ancestor was Wen Lanfeng. In this world, who else could ask Wen Lanfeng to go to the South Sea to apologize but that person in the South Sea? Oh my God. This girl was easy to provoke, but why did she provoke him? The elder ancestor could not give face to anyone, but he had to give face to that person. He had saved his life. When Chongjing looked calm, but his heart was in turmoil. That Mr. Nongzhu was actually a person who could influence the legendary elder ancestor of the Wen family? Oh my God. His heart was beating wildly, and he seemed to have found a way to the other side of the sea of bitterness. He had long had this intention, so he more or less knew some hidden things, so he knew who Wen Lanfeng was, unlike Princess Wenqing who was ignorant. 800 taels of gold will be fine? When Yu Yuan murmured. When he heard Wenqing sobbing without knowing the immensity of heaven and earth, he immediately pointed his finger and shouted angrily, "Still crying? Do you know that you almost caused a terrible disaster? If something happens, even your father will be implicated and no one can save you." The sobbing stopped and Wenqing's mouth opened, Her hair was disheveled and she stood there pitifully, not daring to cry anymore. It was the first time she had seen Uncle Wang so angry at her. When she heard that even her father might be implicated, she finally believed that she had really provoked someone she could not afford to offend. With tears in her eyes, she tried to guess who the vulgar guy with the big fan was. Outside the hall, a servant lightly walked in and respectfully said, "Your Highness, lunch is ready. Please enjoy your meal." "Get lost." Wen Yuyuan roared wildly. Immediately, the servant was so scared that he scrambled out, not knowing how he had offended the prince. "Come." Wen Yuyuan shouted again. 2 guards with sabers on their waists quickly ran in to greet him. Wen Yuyuan waved at Wenqing and said in a deep voice, "Order all the guards in the embassy to keep an eye on the princess. Without my order, no one is allowed to let the princess go out. If you let her step out, I'll take both of your heads." "Yes." The 2 guards stood up, but they were shocked. Although the prince was noble, it was a bit too much to put the princess under house arrest. But they were the guards of the prince's mansion, so they stood behind the princess without saying a word, obeying the prince's order. "Uncle Wang." Qing knows she was wrong, Wenqing said with infinite grievance. But it was useless to act spoiled today. When Yuyuan said sternly, "Shut up, I will ask your father to punish you when we go back." Wenqing was dumbfounded. Wenbai shook his head and sighed. When Chongjing, on the other hand, realized how powerful Mr. Nongzhu was. After when Yuyuan calmed down a little, he turned and said, "Brother Wenbai, I will go change first. I will trouble you to bring me to see Mr. later. I want to apologize in person. Since Mr. has promised not to pursue the matter, I believe he will not go back on his words. If we go, I am afraid we will make Mr. unhappy." Wenbai was stunned. When Yuyuan said with a bitter smile, "I will not be at ease without seeing him. I hope Brother Wenbai can understand." Although he said that, he more or less wanted to get to know the senior expert. He had never seen the ancestor in his life, so it was enough to be able to see Mr. Nongzhu. "All right then," Wenbai said with a helpless smile. Following which, the 2 of them walked out together, leaving only the 4 of them in the hall. The 2 guards stayed close to the princess, while Wenqing stared at Wen Chongjing with endless resentment and said, "Brother Wang, you have to stay behind and accompany me." Cough cough. Wen Chongjing coughed twice and said, "Father also told me to do something. I do not have time to accompany you for now. Take care, sister. The 2 of you must not neglect the princess." The last sentence was said to the 2 guards, clearly telling them to keep a close watch. After saying that, he hurriedly ran away. "Brother Wang, stop right there." Wenqing's tiger-like roar came from behind him and he ran even faster. At Guangying Tavern, after Yu Qianqiu and the others had eaten and drunk their fill, Boss Sang called for someone to clean up the leftovers. He personally went to the street outside and bought 3 money pouches. These things were what Yu Qianqiu wanted. He was naturally prepared to spend money to accompany Furong shopping, but hanging a storage pouch outside was too conspicuous, so he still needed the money pouches. Boss Sang had just returned to the entrance of Guangying Tavern with the 3 money pouches when he came face to face with 4 people. One of them was the person who had previously compensated Mr. Nongzhu. Although he did not understand why they had come again, he still nodded and smiled in greeting. Wenbai glanced at the 3 money pouches in Boss Sang's hands and immediately understood. He cupped his hands and said with a smile, "Boss, we meet again. Is that Mr. still in the tavern?" Boss Sang quickly looked them up and down, then returned the greeting and asked, "What business do you have with Mr. Nongzhu?" When Yuyuan, who was standing to the side, cupped his hands and said with a smile, "This humble one has come to apologize to Mr. Nongzhu because of my niece's recklessness. I'll have to trouble Boss Sang to inform him." As he spoke, he slightly waved his hand behind him. A guard took out a shining white ingot of silver and stuffed it into Boss Sang's hands. Boss Sang put on a happy expression and said, "Please wait a moment. I will go inform him immediately." He then hurriedly ran inside. When he reached the back courtyard, he saw that the innocent woman was playing with the 3 piles of gold and silver on the table. She was having a great time. Mr. Nongzhu was standing to the side, waving his fan and watching with a smile. General Zhang Ping suddenly turned around. When he saw that it was Mr. Nongzhu, his vigilant gaze relaxed. Chapter 465. Sir, the people from Baiwan Nation are here again. This time they have an extraordinary bearing. He said that the princess is his niece and wants to apologize to you. Boss Sang walked over and reported. "Oh." Yu Qianqiu turned his head and said, "Could it be that a prince has come as well?" That's good, I don't have to make a trip myself. Let them come. Boss Sang handed him the 3 money pouches and went out to fetch the people. Yu Qianqiu put the money pouches on the table and said with a smile, "Are you done dividing them? If you are, then pack them up." Furong grunted and excitedly packed the 3 piles of gold and silver, handing them to the 2. Zhang Peng cupped his hands and said, "Thank you, mistress." Seeing that the 2 had hung the money pouches on their waists, Furong imitated them. Outside Guangying Inn, as a powerful prince of Baiwan nation, this was the first time when Yu Yuan was summoned outside a small inn. After a while, Boss Sang came out and cupped his hands at them. "Sir is inside, please follow me." When Yu Yuan cupped his hands in thanks and the 4 followed him in. When he arrived at the entrance of the courtyard, Yu Yuan couldn't help but feel nervous. The person he wanted to see was not someone from the secular circle at all, but an immortal-like figure that was above the secular world. He wouldn't put him, a king, in his eyes at all. To put it bluntly, if he was not related to the ancestor Wen Lanfeng, the other party would not even bother to pay attention to him. This time he would not rashly barge in. Although he did not bring many guards, he still waved 2 guards to stand outside. As soon as he entered, his eyes fell on the young man who was calmly waving a large fan in the middle. The woman was naturally not Sir Nongzhu. That big man with eyes all over his body was even more unlikely to be a living immortal. Although he was nervous, he could not help but praise him. As expected of an earth immortal, someone who was estimated to be more than 1,000 years old was still so young. He walked quickly and bowed deeply, saying respectfully, "Baiwan nations, when Yu Yuan pays his respects to Sir." He did not dare to call himself this prince. Wenbai also bowed. Boss Sang stopped at the courtyard entrance and did not follow in to disturb them. "There is no need for such formalities." "Say it. Why are you looking for me?" Yu Qianqiu asked. He still had to put on the airs of an expert. When Yu Yuan did not dare to raise his head as he said, "Junior's niece is a scholar." She did not know that she had offended Mr. After Junior learned of this, I was truly terrified and came over to apologize. "Enough." Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly. "Just for this? Didn't I say that I would let bygones be bygones? Do I have to reply again? You don't take my words seriously?" He glanced at Wenbai indifferently. A ghastly and terrifying aura instantly enveloped the 2 of them. This kind of aura that brought them to the brink of despair was something the 2 of them had never experienced in their lives. Then a faint bone-piercing chill touched their bodies, causing them to feel as though their bodies were about to be frozen stiff. Their upper teeth were chattering as they shivered. When Yu Yuan wanted to open his mouth to explain, but he found it difficult to even speak. He glanced at Wenbai out of the corner of his eye and was even more shocked. He naturally knew that Wenbai was a cultivator, but Wenbai's entire body was on the verge of collapse, as though he could collapse to the ground at any moment. It was obvious that the pain he was enduring was even greater than his own. He was immediately scared out of his wits. He thought to himself, "My life is over. If I had known earlier, I wouldn't have come here." In fact, Wenbai had already entered a semi-conscious state. One must know that the power of the netherworld ghost flame was something that even Ze, who was in the late stages of crossing tribulation, could not withstand, let alone an early-stage nascent soul like him. Yu Qianqiu knew that words were useless. If he wanted to convince the other party that he was Mr. Nongzhu, he had to show off his power. When Yu Yuan did have a trace of doubt just now. Was this young man really that Mr. Nongzhu? Although this thought only flashed by, he was now sure of it without a doubt. This kind of coercion was not something that could be achieved with aura, but with a divine ability. Although the power of the netherworld ghost flame only affected the 2 people in front of him, Furong and Zhang Peng were sensitive enough to capture a little bit of horror. Coupled with the 2 people's dying expressions, they immediately understood that it was Yu Qianqiu showing his might. "I'll give Wen Lanfeng face this time. If there's a next time, think about the consequences yourself." Scram. Yu Qianqiu shouted lightly and withdrew the coercion that the black fire gave to the 2 people. The 2 people immediately felt as if they had returned to the side of a warm stove from an ice cave. After a while, they slowly recovered and bowed as if they had been pardoned. They did not dare to say any more nonsense. When the 2 people walked to the gate of the courtyard, a faint voice came from behind them, "Wait." The 2 people slowly turned around as if they were struck by lightning. Their faces were deathly pale. Could it be that he changed his mind again and wanted to kill the 2 of them? Yu Qianqiu waved his fan and said with a faint smile, "Prince Wen, I just happen to have something that I need your help with. I wonder if it will be troublesome?" When Yu Yuan looked at the smile on his face and could not help but shiver. This strange person's temper was really hard to fathom. The speed at which he changed his attitude was really fast. He had just made a thunderous move and now he sprinkled rain. He quickly walked over and bowed. I don't dare. Mister, please tell me. This junior will do his best. I heard that the Dying Kingdom is holding some kind of martial arts competition to select a son-in-law. The participants are all people of status. Yu Qianqiu closed his fan and pointed at Zhang Peng, saying, I'll have to trouble you to help my follower register as a member of the upper class of the Baiwan Kingdom. We will also go and join in the fun. When Yu Yuan was startled and did not have the demeanor that a prince should have. He could not wrap his head around it. Why would such a person care about a son-in-law? What? If it is difficult, then forget it. I won't see you out. Yu Qianqiu slowly turned around. It is not difficult, it is not difficult. Mr. has misunderstood. This junior is glad to be able to serve Mr. How can there be any difficulty? When Yu Yuan immediately cupped his hands towards Zhang Peng and said, This junior wants to know Mr.'s name. Zhang Peng replied indifferently. So it is Mr. Zhang Peng. I will remember it. This junior will immediately handle it. When Yu Yuan bowed towards Yu Qianqiu and hurriedly left with the few people. Prince? That's all there is to it. Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows and opened his fan. He walked in front of Furong and stretched out his hand with a smile, saying, Let's go. I will teach you how to spend money. Furong nodded excitedly, grabbed his hand and followed him happily. The three of them strolled along the bustling streets of Deyang City. Because they had taken the breath-concealing pill, they were not afraid of being recognized as cultivators. Zhang Peng followed behind the two of them and silently looked around. Yu Qianqiu held Furong's hand and waved his large fan, looking like a hedonistic son of a rich family. On the other hand, it was Furong's first time on the streets of the secular world. Faced with the people coming and going, the continuous flow of horse carriages, and the dazzling array of shops on both sides of the street, she felt that 2 eyes were not enough. Look and look. If you like anything, you can use the money in your pouch to buy it. Yu Qianqiu pointed at the shops on both sides of the street and smiled. Letting her understand the ways of the world and the secular world was better than educating her. This was called making her sensible first. Furong nodded a little nervously. She looked around and prepared to choose her first target. Suddenly, her eyes fell on a few children who were dancing on the side of the street. The boys and girls were like carved jade, innocent and lively, and their smiles were as bright as the sun. They looked really cute. I'll buy them. Furong directly pointed at the children. Yu Qianqiu and Zhang Peng felt as if they were struck by lightning and were stunned for a long time. Then Zhang Peng, who was as big as him, lowered his head and looked around for something. Where did my money go? This caused the passers-by to also look at the road. You can't buy that. Yu Qianqiu smiled awkwardly and hurriedly dragged her into a shop. He began to teach her how to buy things step by step and even how to bargain. He also began to carefully teach her some things about the ways of the world. After a few practice sessions, Furong fully displayed a woman's talent for shopping. She improved at a godly speed, and the price she haggled caused Yu Qianqiu and Zhang Peng to be dumbstruck. She was really good at helping Yu Qianqiu save money. The more Furong talked, the more courageous she became. From the looks of it, it seemed as if she wanted to go to all the shops in Deyang City one by one. Yu Qianqiu always had a doting attitude towards this girl. Thus, he took a few deep breaths and prepared to risk his life to accompany his wife to go shopping. Zhang Peng carried more and more things in his arms and shoulders. He had no choice but to find a hidden place to throw them into his storage pouch. He couldn't understand. What was the use of those stone stools, doors, weights and the like? Was it because they were cheap? In his heart, he secretly decided not to do it again. In the future, he would resolutely refuse to go shopping with women. It was too scary. It was even scarier than being ambushed on the battlefield. The owner of this shop is too unscrupulous. I'm not buying from him. Let's go to another shop. Furong angrily pulled Yu Qianqiu out of a toilet bowl shop. In the beginning it was Yu Qianqiu who pulled her, but now it was she who pulled Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu staggered from her pull and almost tripped over the doorsill. He repeatedly nodded his head, and his heart was filled with endless joy. It turned out that bringing a woman shopping was the fastest way to educate her. This trip was not made in vain. Continue. Zhang Peng, who was following behind, almost burst into tears. He thought to himself, Master, what a pure and innocent woman. She didn't even spend an afternoon. She was educated to this extent by you. On the bustling street, there was a person following the three from afar. It was none other than Wen Yuan's son, Wen Chongzheng. Guangying Tavern had been booked by someone. The three of them matched the number of men and women. In addition, the owner of the tavern had respectfully sent them out. It was likely that the person waving the large fan was Mr. Nongzhu, who had caused his father to leave in such a sorry state. Although they were strolling on the bustling street, it had to be said that Zhang Peng's vigilance was not something an ordinary person could compare to. After strolling along a few streets, he discovered that the same person was following them from afar. He immediately transmitted his voice to Yu Qianqiu, "Master, there's someone following us." Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly. When they reached the entrance of an alley, he pulled Furong along and the three of them walked in together. Not long after, a person had just stuck his head into the alley to take a look when Zhang Peng, who was guarding the entrance, reached out and grabbed him by the neck. He directly dragged him in and threw him to the ground. Yu Qianqiu smiled as he put away his fan and said, "You like to follow?" Zhang Peng break his pair of dog legs first. The person following them was naturally Wen Chongzheng. He was dizzy from the fall, but when he heard this, he immediately sobered up. He hurriedly begged for mercy, Mr. Nongzhu, it's a misunderstanding. It's really a misunderstanding." Chapter 466. Hearing this, Zhang Peng stopped. He knew that his master was now that Mr. Nongzhu, so he looked at Yu Qianqiu with a questioning gaze. "Oh, since you know who I am and still dare to follow me, you've got guts." Yu Qianqiu smiled faintly and said, "Why are you following me? Tell me the truth. If you lie, I'll tear you apart and feed you to the dogs. Get up and speak." Although he said this with a smile, Wen Chongzheng felt a chill run down his spine. He did not dare to doubt that Miaoyi was joking. He immediately climbed to his feet with the help of the wall. Trembling, he said, "I am Wen Chongzheng, the second son of Baiwan country's Prince of Tranquility, Wen Yuan. Today, I heard Uncle Bai and my father mention you, so I was curious and followed my father to the inn where you were staying. When I saw you come out, I couldn't help but follow you." "Couldn't help but follow me?" Yu Qianqiu laughed mockingly. He narrowed his eyes as he recalled some of the matters regarding Baiwan country recorded in the Jade Archive, especially the rule that the royal family could only have one heir. He already had some guesses in his heart. He tapped his fan on his palm and said, "A prince who's about to be demoted to a commoner dares to play tricks in front of me." Zhang Peng twist his head off and send it to his father. "Spare me, mister." Before Zhang Peng could make a move, Wen Chongzheng knelt down and kowtowed repeatedly in fear. "Mister's eyes are sharp. I'm following you because I want to bask in your glory." After he finished speaking, he pressed his head against the ground and his body trembled uncontrollably. The feeling of his life hanging by a thread made him regret coming. Yu Qianqiu waved his fan and signaled for Zhang Peng to stop. He said in a seemingly unintentional manner, "Bask in my glory? Do you want to inherit the prince's title, or become the emperor of Baiwan country?" These words hit the kneeling man's weak spot. When Chongzheng suddenly raised his head as if he had been injected with adrenaline. He was no longer afraid. He came to look for Yu Qianqiu because he knew Mr. Nongzhu's influence in Baiwan country. Originally, he wanted to ask Yu Qianqiu to put in a good word for him. Presumably, his father would not dare to offend Mr. Nongzhu, so the right to inherit the throne would basically fall on him. Who knew? Who knew that Mr. Nongzhu would say the word, emperor, so casually? Judging from his tone, it was not a big deal to give him the throne. When Chongzheng's blood immediately boiled, and he forcefully suppressed the surprise in his heart. He cupped his fists and said respectfully, "I don't dare to be picky and I'm willing to follow Mister's arrangement." He wasn't stupid and knew that going too far was as bad as not going far enough. Yu Qianqiu opened his golden folding fan and admired the large group of rich and noble peonies on it. He said leisurely, "Why should I help you arrange it? What benefits do I get?" At the side, Zhang Peng's eyes slightly drooped. Master was indeed master. Whatever he casually used was a trick. It was worth learning. When Chongzheng's spirit was lifted, he was afraid that the other party wouldn't help him. Since the other party had stated the conditions, it would be easy. He immediately said with a solemn expression, "Thunder and rain are all bestowed upon me by Mr. As long as I have the slightest bit of success in the future, as long as Mr. gives the order, I will be the first to act according to my abilities." The meaning hidden in his words was very simple. If you can make me your highness, you can make me do anything you want within your authority as a king. If you let me become the emperor, then I can do anything within the emperor's authority. Wen Chongzheng. What a good name. As expected, you're made for politics. Yu Qianqiu smiled faintly. Ah. When Chongjing smiled awkwardly and said, Mr. has misunderstood. Chongjing is the Chongjing of respect for the seniors. It is the Chongjing of being upright like the seniors. It is not a political career. Damn it. What a talent for bootlicking. Able to bow and submit, willing to do anything for the sake of the throne. He's even more ruthless than me. Yu Qianqiu sized up this fellow. He had a dignified appearance, but there was a hint of malice hidden in his expression. As expected, he had the appearance of an ambitious and ruthless character. Get up. How can a future emperor always kneel before others? Yu Qianqiu's tone became much gentler. Zhang Peng's eyes darted around. Master was really awesome. He casually promised someone else to be the emperor. Who knew when he would fulfill his promise? When Chongjing's spirit was lifted. He stood up and said, no matter what I become, I will never dare to be arrogant in front of Mr. Alright. Don't be so mushy. Don't follow me anymore. Yu Qianqiu held his fan and patted his shoulder. He said, I've taken your matter to heart. Go back. I'll look for you if there's anything. It's fine. This junior has practiced martial arts since young. I can carry and carry. I can also accompany Mr. to shop. When Chongjing flattered, he subconsciously glanced at Zhang Peng from the corner of his eyes. It was obvious that he had followed Zhang Peng all the way here. Zhang Peng immediately gave him a look of approval. Shopping really wasn't something a man should do. This brat is not bad. Chem? Yu Qianqiu's face turned cold. He snorted coldly. It seemed to be saying, you dare to not listen to me? A chill that could take one's soul away came pressing down. When Chongjing couldn't help but shiver. He hurriedly bowed and said, this junior knows his mistake. This junior will take his leave. He turned around and quickly walked out of the alley. The three of them slowly walked out, and Hibiscus continued her passionate shopping spree. Along the way, they could feel that the entire Deyang city was brimming with a festive atmosphere. From the mouths of the commoners on the road, they heard the most about the emperor's beloved daughter, the third Princess Zhao Qinxiang's competition to choose her son-in-law. From time to time, they could see the nobles from various countries strolling around the streets. They wantonly spent money in the shops that caught their eye. The happiest ones were the business owners. Who wouldn't be happy when their business was booming? The three of them smelled a tempting fragrance of meat on the street. They saw a tall and sturdy man selling lamb chops on the street. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand. The three of them walked over and prepared to open their fast. On the fiery red charcoal stove, the golden and tender lamb chops were roasted. The fat from the roasting dripped into the charcoal fire, causing some ashes to rise. The boss ordered the ingredients and quickly smeared them on a row of barbecued skewers. His skillful movements attracted many customers. The three of them mingled with the crowd and became customers on the side of the road. Furong wandered around in this vast sea of people for a long time. She was no longer afraid of strangers. She mixed in with the crowd and chewed on the lamb chops without the slightest scruple. Yu Qianqiu spent most of his time on her. Seeing that she ate until her mouth was covered with grease, he would occasionally take out a piece of cloth to wipe her face. Furong would always smile foolishly in response, causing Yu Qianqiu's heart to soften. The passers-by by the side of the road cast strange gazes at the two of them. In this era, men and women were more conservative in public. They had never seen a man be so bold on the streets. While the man looked at her in disdain, the women who had shown themselves looked at Furong enviously. In everyone's eyes, Yu Qianqiu was extraordinarily handsome, while Furong looked ordinary. However, it was this ordinary-looking woman who had won the favor of such an outstanding man. It made people feel that it was illogical. Therefore, many people guessed that the man must be living off a woman. Although the woman was not good-looking, she must have a family background. Zhang Peng was speechless when he saw how affectionate the two of them were. The leader of Utopia, an influential figure in the cultivation world, actually had such a side to him. Actually, he had always had a question. Utopia's Chu Ping'er was the first woman he knew. Now that he had another mistress, he wondered if there were any other mistresses. If there were, which one was older and which one was younger? The stall owner of the roasted lamb chops had long noticed the three people beside him. He waited for the business to slow down a little and not so busy. He suddenly picked up 3 skewers of lamb chop and handed them to the three of them, causing them to look at each other in dismay. It's free. I'll give it to you for free. The burly man laughed heartily and said, I can tell that the young master is a good person. This madam is also a blessed person. This big brother is also an honest person. He had been observing people for a long time in the marketplace. The way Yu Qianqiu looked at Furong did not have any hint of hypocrisy. It was not what others thought. Furong's eyes were clean and pure. It was not something that could be faked. While Zhang Peng was eating, he would constantly observe the surroundings, intentionally or unintentionally separating the two of them from the others. Clearly he was a guard who was very responsible. Therefore he came to this conclusion. Yu Qianqiu did not think much of what he said, but he was very happy when he praised Furong. He nodded in approval and said, "Boss, you indeed have good taste. My madam is naturally the most blessed person in the world." "Well said. You should be rewarded." He took out a huge ingot of glistening yellow gold and stuffed it into the boss's hand. The boss was dumbfounded. How long did he have to set up his stall to earn such a huge lump of gold? He immediately waved his hands and said, "I can't accept it, I can't accept it." Zhang Peng snorted coldly and said, "My master said you can accept it, so you can accept it. If you continue being long-winded, I'll smash your stall." Yu Qianqiu smiled and nodded in tacit agreement. The customers in front of the stall looked at each other in dismay. This was the first time they saw someone forcing someone to accept money. The boss embarrassedly put away the ingot of gold and said with an awkward smile, "Young master is a noble person, then I won't be polite with you. I have roasted lamb chops here. Young master, please eat as much as you want. Young master, please don't be polite, otherwise I won't be able to sleep because of this money. This is a business transaction. Alright, deal." Yu Qianqiu nodded in agreement. The three of them did not stand on ceremony and ate as they should. They even chatted with the boss from time to time. The sky was gradually shrouded in a layer of twilight. Just as the three of them were about to return, a group of imperial bodyguards on tall horses opened the way in front of them. Behind them was a luxurious carriage. Yu Qianqiu did not think much of it. There were many nobles in the secular world. He only glanced at them casually, but he suddenly realized that the people in the lead were somewhat familiar. For a moment he could not remember where he had seen them. When the carriage passed by him, he saw an old man on horseback protecting him. He narrowed his eyes slightly. The people in front of him also reminded him of who they were. This old man was none other than Elder Lu Wanwan of the Hundred Flowers Valley Cultivation Alliance, who disappeared after Ong Kwangtsung was wiped out. The people in front were also disciples of Ong Kwangtsung. Yu Qianqiu had wanted to find this old man to settle the score, but he had not been able to find him. He did not expect to meet him here. It was really a small world for enemies. Chapter 467. What he didn't expect was that the dignified elder Ong Kwangtsung from back then would actually become someone else's bodyguard. He didn't know who was sitting in the carriage that they actually needed a cultivator to protect him. Could it be another prince? Compared to China's cultivation world, the situation here was really different. It seemed very normal for cultivators and mortals to mix together. It was a little worthless. He swept his gaze across the group of people. There were quite a lot of cultivators among them. There were more than 10 cultivators in the Foundation Establishment realm, Core Formation realm, and Nascent Soul realm. With such ostentatious behavior, Yu Qianqiu really wanted to know who was inside the carriage. Lu Wanqian rode on a tall horse with an arrogant look on his face. It seemed like he felt honored to be able to serve as a bodyguard. His gaze swept back and forth before meeting Yu Qianqiu's gaze. Yu Qianqiu even smiled and nodded at him. Lu Wanwan was slightly startled. This gaze was a little familiar, but he had never seen this person before. After pondering for a moment, the group of people had already brushed past Yu Qianqiu. He naturally couldn't recognize him. First of all, he couldn't see through Yu Qianqiu's cultivation level. Moreover, he was wearing an exquisite human skin mask. It should be known that the human skin masks Shi Wenguang ordered people to make for Yu Qianqiu and the others were made by the best masters in the army of several million. They were thin and lifelike, almost to the point of passing off the fake as the real thing. How could he recognize them just by looking at them? After watching the group of people leave, Yu Qianqiu gave Zhang Peng a look. Zhang Peng understood and nodded slightly. He quietly retreated and disappeared into the crowd. "Let's go. I'll accompany you for a walk." Yu Qianqiu pulled Hibiscus along. Hibiscus looked around and asked in surprise, "Yu Qianqiu, where's Zhang Peng?" He had something to attend to, so he left first. Yu Qianqiu smiled. The owner of the roasted lamb behind him shouted, "Young master, come back tomorrow. I won't charge you any more." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand with his back facing the owner. When the lanterns were first lit, the two of them strolled along the streets. Looking at the lights of tens of thousands of households, Hibiscus felt relaxed and happy. How could one see these things on Fushin Island? In particular, when she passed by a certain brothel, she saw many gorgeously dressed women chattering with each other. In addition, there were all kinds of beautiful lanterns. Hibiscus couldn't help but want to rush inside to take a look. Yuchencho jumped in fright. "Great Aunt, this is not a place you can go." He hurriedly pulled her back and told her where they were without any hesitation. After Furong figured it out, she did not dare to go any more. However, from the way she kept looking back, it seemed that she was very curious about that place. When the crowd on the street began to thin out, Hibiscus still strolled around without feeling tired. Yuchencho had no choice. He still had things to do, so he could not just play around. He had already indulged himself very much today, so he promised to bring her out again next time. Only then did he persuade Hibiscus to go back. When the two of them returned to Guangying Inn, Zhang Peng was already back. At the same time, Wenbai was also there. The two of them were waiting in the courtyard. Boss Sang, who was at the side, said respectfully, "Sir, this esteemed guest has been waiting for you since before dinner. He has been waiting until now. You can leave first." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand to dismiss Boss Sang. He then asked Zhang Peng, "Is it done?" "Yes, sir," Zhang Peng replied. Yu Qianqiu nodded, gratified. Zhang Peng had been on the battlefield for many years. Usually people who knew how to fight weren't just brave and fierce. They were also very smart and experienced when it came to handling matters. There were some things that didn't need to be said. Usually he would understand with a glance. If trained well, he would definitely be a good helper. This was the reason why he chose Zhang Peng to follow him. "What business do you have with me?" Yu Qianqiu finally asked Wenbai. Wenbai hurriedly replied, "Prince Pingxin has ordered me to inform Senior that Senior's task has been completed." "I understand." Yu Qianqiu nodded. He suddenly paused and raised his head to look at the bright moon in the sky. After a moment's thought, he said, "There's one more thing I need to trouble your prince with. Go back and ask your prince. Tell him that I would like to stay at his place for a while. It would be best if I could go tonight. Would it be a bother?" Wenbai was taken aback. He immediately said, "No, of course not. Sir is an esteemed guest that no one can invite. His Highness would definitely welcome you with open arms." "You should go back and ask your Highness first," Yu Qianqiu said calmly. Wenbai still wanted to say something, but when he thought of the temperamental nature of this gentleman, he didn't dare to disobey him. He immediately cupped his hands and quickly returned to the prince's residence to report. As soon as he left, Yu Qianqiu immediately extended his hand towards Zhang Peng and asked, "Where are the things you bought today?" Zhang Peng took out a storage pouch from his bosom and gave it to him. Yu Qianqiu took the pouch and handed it over to Furong. He smiled and said, "Go back to the room and have a look. This is the things you bought today." Furong's eyes brightened. She immediately took the pouch and went back to the room to check. At this time, Zhang Peng approached and reported, "The person in the carriage today was the Prime Minister of Daeong Kingdom." This disciple followed them back to the Prime Minister's residence. "Originally, I wanted to enter the residence to investigate. However, when the Prime Minister entered the residence, several divine senses swept back and forth several times. If I hadn't taken the restraining breath pill, they would have treated me as an ordinary person. I'm afraid I would have been exposed. This disciple was afraid of alerting the enemy, so I had to return first." Yu Qianqiu frowned and said, "In that case, there are still cultivators hidden in the Prime Minister's residence. Moreover, their cultivation level might be higher than yours? At least not lower than mine. Also," Zhang Ping muttered, "this disciple suspects that the old coachman who drove the Prime Minister's carriage is also an expert who goes out to protect the Prime Minister. Although this disciple can't see through his cultivation level, I noticed that when the Prime Minister got off the carriage, the old coachman didn't even look at the Prime Minister. Moreover, the Prime Minister seemed to be very respectful towards him. This is really contrary to common sense." "There's such a thing?" Yu Qianqiu felt strange and said, "The Princess of Baiwan Kingdom was only protected by an early nascent soul cultivator. It's a bit strange that a mere Prime Minister has so many cultivators protecting him." Zhang Ping said, "This disciple will find an opportunity to sneak in again to investigate. Don't do anything rash. This is not the Huaxia cultivation world. Almost every country has one or two soul formation cultivators overseeing it. Those old fellows have drawn these countries into their own sphere of influence. You can't be careless." Yu Qianqiu tapped his fan and said, "However, there is an old enemy. I will have to drag him out and settle old scores. I will personally pay a visit to the Prime Minister's residence tonight." I will accompany Master to wreak havoc in the Prime Minister's residence. Zhang Peng was excited just thinking about it. He immediately cupped his fists and asked for permission. His military style was back. Nonsense. Who said I'm going to wreak havoc in the Prime Minister's residence? Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes and said, after leaving China's cultivation world, we don't know anything about the cultivation world here. I'm just going there to get a feel for the situation and find out the truth. If there's any danger, I won't be able to do anything if you go. Besides. He pointed at the house and said, besides, your master's wife's cultivation level isn't high. I'm not at ease leaving her alone for now. You'll have to work hard and help me look after her. Understood. Zhang Peng said this with some reluctance. Speaking of which, back in Utopia, he had practically been training in actual combat every day. For someone like him who loved fighting, it was truly a joy to fight. During this period of time, he had been playing and eating every day. He was so bored that he felt like birds were going to fly out of his mouth. It was truly boring. He really wanted to say, why do you always have a woman by your side? Why don't you just throw her into Utopia? However, when he thought about the scene of the two masters' wives meeting, he couldn't help but worry for his master. No wonder he never returned home. The two of them continued to discuss some matters. Not long after, they heard the sound of a carriage outside. A moment later, Boss Sang ran in and reported, Sir, those two esteemed guests are here again. They've brought 2 carriages and a group of guards with them. Yu Qianqiu nodded and said, Boss Sang, thank you for your warm hospitality. I will be leaving tonight, so you can open your tavern as usual. Otherwise, your secret will be exposed sooner or later. I'll be taking my leave now. With that said, he cupped his hands. Boss Sang hurriedly returned the greeting. Sir, you're worrying too much. The Grand General has already ordered that as long as you need it, you can do it at all costs. A mere tavern really isn't much. I appreciate your and your general's good intentions. I still have matters to attend to, so I can't delay any longer. Let's just leave it at that. Yu Qianqiu said with a smile. Sir, your matters are important, so I dare not disturb you. I'll have the people outside wait for a moment. Boss Sang tactfully retreated. Yu Qianqiu entered the room and had Furong pack up. When the 3 of them walked out of the tavern, they discovered that Wen Yuan had personally come to welcome them with one by accompanying him. The 2 respectfully invited the 3 of them to board the carriage. After Yu Qianqiu and Furong boarded the carriage, they heard Wen Yuan repeatedly asking Zhang Peng to board the carriage as well, but Zhang Peng was more than happy to ride a horse. Thus, sitting in the carriage, he directly said, Your Highness, don't make it too eye-catching. Let Zhang Peng ride. The argument outside immediately stopped, and the prince had no choice but to board the other 2 carriages. The group of carriages began to move. Zhang Peng nimbly mounted the horse and lifted the reins to accompany his master's carriage. This was the first time Furong had sat in such a slow fellow. From time to time she would poke her head out to look. Yu Qianqiu smiled faintly and instructed one by to go back and report. He knew that the other side would come to pick them up. His main purpose was to let this lass have a taste of riding in the carriage. Perhaps in the future she would not always have the leisure to do so. When they arrived outside the Baiwan nation's embassy, they discovered that the entrance was already wide open to welcome the 3 of them. Yu Qianqiu did not want to stay outside and be conspicuous, so he immediately walked in. Many of the Baiwan nation's royal relatives and nobles did not know who these people were. Unexpectedly, their highness had to personally welcome them in the middle of the night. Although they were confused, it was not appropriate for them to ask too much. They all greeted the 3 people who walked over. The 2 people in the lead were the hipster and Wen Chongzheng. The hipster had already reverted to her female clothes. That rich and noble aura of a princess, coupled with her extraordinary appearance, was indeed superior to everyone else. Yu Qianqiu stopped slightly and said to her, You are clearly a beautiful woman, but you dress up as a man and act like a lunatic. Do you have nothing better to do? The hipster doesn't dare. The dignified princess lowered her arrogant head. Everyone was shocked. Who was this person? He actually dared to reprimand the princess in public, and this unruly princess actually obediently admitted her mistake? Yu Qianqiu turned around and pointed the fan in his hand at Wen Chongzheng. He asked, Your Highness, who is this person? Wen Yuan hurriedly replied, This is this little prince's second son, Wen Chongzheng. What's wrong, sir? Is there a problem? Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly and said, His appearance is very good. He will definitely be an outstanding person in the future. After he finished speaking, he directly walked towards the main hall. Wen Yuan was stunned for a moment before he hurriedly chased after him. Chapter 468. The 2 rows of people began to disperse in 2s and 3s. When Chongjing stood there motionlessly as though he was frozen in place. Yu Qianzhou's words immediately made him feel the warmth of spring. Sir clearly knows me, but he pretended not to know me and said those words on purpose. This means that Sir has the intention to help me. When Chongjing's imagination was running wild. He had already seen the day when he would wear the imperial robe. He did not know that the people around him had already dispersed. The extremely depressed hipster lowered his head slightly. He suddenly noticed that when Chongjing was in a daze. He walked over and kicked his calf. He said in a bad mood, "Brother Wang, why are you in a daze? Have you become stupid from all the praises?" When Chongjing suddenly came to his senses. He looked around and realized that he had indeed lost his composure. He quickly shook his head and said, "No, no." He minded his own business and walked away. The hipster was stunned and looked at his own feet. His kick just now should have been quite strong. Why did he not have any reaction at all? Yu Qianzhou and the others entered and looked around. A residence that belonged to the secular world was indeed not ordinary. When Yu Yuan chased after him to the main hall, he dismissed the people around him and found an opportunity to ask carefully, "Does Sir know the art of foresight and fortune-telling?" "That's what fortune-tellers do. I don't have the leisure to do that." Yu Qianzhou snorted disdainfully. He walked to the seat in the middle that belonged to the prince and sat down. When Yu Yuan was perturbed. This matter concerned his son's life, but he still braced himself and asked humbly, "Just now, Sir said that my son's fortune-telling is very good and that he will definitely be an outstanding person in the future." This prince is confused after hearing this. "Sir, please give me some guidance." "I'm just fooling your son and you took it seriously?" Yu Qianzhou glanced at him and thought that there was no need to be so harsh. He had not figured out what was going on with this family and did not know if they had any value. Thus, he deliberately mystified and said, "The secrets of heaven cannot be revealed. Your Highness, please do not ask any more." These words were enough to give Yu Yuan a lot of thought. It was really mysterious and there was a lot of room for imagination. Yu Qianzhou looked at his hesitant expression and interrupted with a smile. "Wang Yi, do you have a place for us 3 to stay?" Yes. It has been prepared a long time ago. It is the small courtyard that the princess used to live in alone. It is very quiet." When Yu Yuan came back to his senses and said, the place he arranged for Yu Qianzhou and the others was the best place in the whole embassy. Originally, it belonged to the princess, but now that Mr. Nongzhu was here, the best place naturally belonged to Mr. Nongzhu. Therefore the princess had to be wronged. After that, when Yu Yuan personally brought the 3 of them to the elegant and tranquil courtyard. There were a few maids in the courtyard to welcome them. The interior was already brightly lit. Yu Qianzhou suddenly stopped in the middle of the courtyard. Everyone stopped at the same time. No one knew what he was thinking. Since this is the place where the princess lives, how can we occupy it? Let's invite the princess back. In any case, there are many rooms here. It is better to live here. Yu Qianzhou said slowly. When Yu Yuan was shocked, a bad thought emerged in his mind. Could it be that he wanted the princess to sleep with him? He couldn't help but stutter, "Teacher, there is no need. Niece Wang is used to being unruly since young. I am really afraid to disturb teacher." "Don't worry too much. She is unruly. I have my own ways to deal with her." Yu Qianzhou looked at Farong and said, "I will be going out later. I am afraid that my wife will be lonely here. Why don't we call the princess over to accompany her? I can be at ease then." Hearing that he was going out, Farong immediately begged, "I will go too." "Be obedient," Yu Qianzhou said softly. Farong was a little unhappy as she fiddled with the belt of her skirt. So that was the case. When Yu Yuan was greatly relieved when he heard this. He nodded repeatedly and said, "It is the princess' fortune that the princess can accompany the madam." He then turned around and ordered the maids, "Quickly go and invite the princess over." Not long after, when Qing's beautiful hair was not combed and was a little messy, she was surprised and bewildered as she was brought over. On this day she realized that ever since she met this Mr. Nongzhu, she was extremely unlucky. She was a dignified princess, but she was bossed around everywhere. She did not even have a place to complain. Not to mention that her good nest was occupied by someone else, she had a belly full of anger. She had just slept for a short while and was pulled up again. This was not a big deal. The key was that she had to meet this Mr. Nongzhu again. She was really scared. "Greetings to teacher," Wen Qing said with fear. When Yu Yuan looked over and a trace of pity appeared in his heart. The dignified princess was scared like a little chick. If she had known this would happen, why did she come to Daeong Kingdom to join in the fun? He tried to slow down his voice as much as possible. Ching, from today onwards, you will accompany the madam and serve her well. You must not be willful. Ching, understands. Scholar stood timidly by Furong's side, saluted and said, Madam. By the time she finished speaking, tears had already started to flow into her stomach, but she did not dare to let them flow out. As the princess of Baiwan Kingdom, she had always been served by others. In just a day she had become a servant who served others. Since the princess is here, get rid of all the other servants. Leave no one behind. Zhang Peng. Yu Qianqiu looked back with a sharp gaze and shouted, No one is allowed to enter. Protect the madam and the princess. If anyone dares to enter this place, kill them no matter who they are. Yes. Zhang Peng cupped his fists and accepted the order. His cold and murderous eyes quickly looked around. Wen Yuan's heart skipped a beat. He immediately waved at the maids, and they retreated while trembling with fear. Wen Yuan and the burly Zhang Peng looked at each other and instinctively shrank back. He really knew how to kill people. Yu Qianqiu glanced at Wen Qing. For the sake of Furong, he put on a warm smile and said, Don't be afraid. If you accompany the madam well during this period of time, I guarantee that you will receive great benefits. Wen Yuan's eyes lit up. He knew that an expert like Mr. Nongzhu would not easily open his mouth. Once he opened his mouth, the rewards would definitely be unimaginable to mortals. When Yu Qianqiu saw the skeptical expression on Wen Qing's face, he could not help but laugh heartily and said, You little girl, do you think that my words would be false? I can tell you that if you can make the madam happy, I can help you stay young forever and preserve your beauty forever. What do you think of this condition? In order to make his lover and family happy, he was willing to pay any price. He could even treat treasures as trash. Wen Yuan's body trembled when he heard this, and he let out a breath of cold air. Heavens! Stay young forever and preserve one's beauty forever. To mortals these words were like the magic of immortals. They were priceless. Not to mention a woman, even a man like him was tempted. When Yuan took a look at Yu Qianqiu's appearance and thought to himself, This Mr. Nongzhu is rumored to be more than 1,000 years old, but he still looks so young. He must know how to preserve one's youth. What he said must be true. Stay young forever and preserve one's beauty forever. This sentence was too tempting to women even if she was a princess. When Qing's trembling eyes suddenly became lively. She gathered her courage and asked weakly, Is what Mr. said true? How rude. When Yuan shouted, Mr. is a god. Why would he lie to a little girl like you? Hurry up and thank Mr. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand at Wen Qing who was about to thank him and said, Don't thank me first. As long as you can do it, I will naturally be able to do it. I will never go back on my words. You can rest assured about this. Whether it was true or not, he had to try it first. Wen Qing did not say anything else. With a whoosh, she hugged Furong's arm and said flatteringly, Madam, let me help you in to rest. The few of them were all stunned. This girl was also a person who would not get up early without benefits. She changed her face really quickly. Yu Qianqiu's expression twitched. When he came back to his senses, he reminded Zhang Peng again, Zhang Peng, be careful. After saying that, he silently disappeared into thin air in front of everyone. He had revealed this move in front of everyone to intimidate some people and prevent any mishaps from happening. Zhang Peng and Furong did not feel anything, but when Yuan and Wen Qing were stunned. They finally saw how powerful Mr. Nongzhu was. He was indeed not an ordinary person. When Yu Qianqiu reappeared, he appeared in the alley where he went shopping during the day. He walked out and looked at the withered street. He gently opened the fan with a large group of rich and noble peonies painted on it and gently waved it. He took a step forward and swayed with each step. He was like a guest who had just come out from a brothel. After fooling around, he went home satisfied. This place was not like China. Before figuring out the situation, he did not dare to fly around. The best way to conceal his identity was to be an ordinary person. After spending some time, he found the house that Zhang Peng had pointed out. This was a very large house. The area it occupied was not small. From the outside he could see the tall pavilions and pavilions inside. There were colorful lights hanging everywhere. It was already midnight, but he could still hear the sound of drums and music coming from inside. Outside the gate, there was an endless stream of high officials and noble people coming and going to pay their respects. This was indeed a noble house. Under the night sky, it was luxurious and ostentatious. Yu Qianqiu circled around twice. He did not dare to act rashly. He hid in a dark corner and pinched his chin, thinking about how to sneak in. If there were really a few experts in the tribulation stage inside, it would be really difficult to sneak in without anyone noticing. In the end, he decided to beat the grass and scare the snake to find out the truth. The small amount of earth fire elements stored in his body diffused out and formed hundreds of small red flying swords. He pointed his finger, and the hundreds of flying swords quietly flew into the night sky. After waiting for a while, seeing that he did not alarm the cultivators inside the house, he used his divine sense to control the flying swords to descend from the sky and shoot them into the big house. Before the flying swords could touch the target, he heard a few shouts coming from inside. "How dare you? Who dares to disturb the Prime Minister's mansion?" Now was the time. Yuchencho used his divine sense. This was the time difference he wanted. He did not want to use the flying swords to hurt anyone. He just wanted to light a small fire to add a little atmosphere to the Prime Minister's mansion. However, this fire seemed to be a little too big. Although the fire formed by the earth fire elements was not as good as the green fire, it was still not something ordinary fire could compare to. Bang bang bang. The hundreds of flying swords all exploded into raging flames. The spectacular fiery red color immediately dyed the night sky red. It was estimated that more than half of Deyang City could see it. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.